Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 201. Vyasa said, King Drupada, after his alliance with the Pandavas, had all his fears dispelled. Indeed, the monarch no longer stood in fear even of the gods. The ladies of the illustrious Drupada's household approached Kunti and introduced themselves unto her, mentioning their respective names, and worshipped her feet with heads touching the ground. Krishna also, attired in red silk and her wrists still encircled with the auspicious thread, saluting her mother-in-law with reverence, stood contentedly before her with joined palms. Pritha, out of affection, pronounced a blessing upon her daughter-in-law endued with great beauty and every auspicious mark and possessed of a sweet disposition and good character, saying, Be thou unto thy husband Isachi unto Indra, Svaha unto Vibhavasu, Rohini unto Soma, Damayanti unto Nala, Bhadra unto Vaisravana, Arundhati unto Vasishtha, Lakshmi unto Narayana. O amiable one, be thou the mother of long-lived and heroic children, and possessed of everything that can make thee happy. Let luck and prosperity ever wait on thee. Wait thou ever on husbands engaged in the performance of grand sacrifices. Be thou devoted to thy husbands. And let thy days be ever passed in duly entertaining and reverencing guests and strangers arrived at thy abode, and the pious and the old, children and superiors. Be thou installed as the queen of the kingdom and the capital of Kurujangala, with thy husband Yudhishthira the just. O daughter, let the whole earth, conquered by the prowess of thy husbands, endued with great strength, be given away by thee unto Brahmanas at horse sacrifice. O accomplished one, whatever gems there are on earth possessed of superior virtues, obtain them, O lucky one, and be thou happy for a full 100 years. And, O daughter-in-law, as I rejoice today beholding thee attired in red silk, so shall I rejoice again, when, O accomplished one, I behold thee become the mother of a son. Vyasa continued, after the sons of Pandu had been married, Hari, Krishna, sent unto them, as presents, various gold ornaments set with pearls and black gems, lapis lazuli. And Madhava, Krishna, also sent unto them costly robes manufactured in various countries, and many beautiful and soft blankets and hides of great value, and many costly beds and carpets and vehicles. He also sent them vessels by hundreds, set with gems and diamonds. And Krishna also gave them female servants by thousands, brought from various countries, and endued with beauty, youth, and accomplishments and decked with every ornament. He also gave them many well-trained elephants brought from the country of Madra, and many excellent horses in costly harness, cars drawn by horses of excellent colors and large teeth. The slayer of Madhu, of immeasurable soul, also sent them coins of pure gold by crores upon crores in separate heaps. And Yudhishthira the just, desirous of gratifying Govinda, accepted all those presents with great joy. Vidura Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 202. Vyasa said, The news was carried unto all the monarchs, who had come to the self-choice of Draupadi, by their trusted spies that the handsome Draupadi had been united in marriage with the sons of Pandu. And they were also informed that the illustrious hero who had bent the bow and shot the mark was none else than Arjuna, that foremost of victorious warriors and first of all wielders of the bow and arrows. And it became known that the mighty warrior who had dashed Salya, the king of Madra, on the ground, and who in wrath had terrified the assembled monarchs by means of the tree he had uprooted, and who had taken his stand before all foes in perfect fearlessness, was none else than Bhima, that feller of hostile ranks, whose touch alone was sufficient to take the lives out of all foes. The monarchs, upon being informed that the Pandavas had assumed the guise of peaceful Brahmanas, wondered much. They even heard that Kunti with all her sons had been burnt to death in the conflagration of the house of Lak. They, therefore, now regarded the Pandavas in the light of persons who had come back from the region of the dead. And recollecting the cruel scheme contrived by Purusharthas, they began to say, Oh, fie on Bhishma, fie on Dhritarashtra of the Kuru race. After the self-choice was over, all the monarchs, who had come thither, hearing that Draupadi had been united with the Pandavas, set out for their own dominions. And Duryodhana, hearing that Draupadi had selected the owner of white steeds, Arjuna, as her lord, became greatly depressed. Accompanied by his brothers, Aswathaman, his uncle, Sakuni, Karna, and Kripa the prince set out with a heavy heart for his capital. Then Dusasana, blushing with shame, addressed his brother softly and said, "If Arjuna had not disguised himself as a Brahmana, he could never have succeeded in obtaining Draupadi. It was for this disguise, O king, that no one could recognize him as Dhananjaya. Fate, I ween, is ever supreme. Exertion is fruitless, fie on our exertions, O brother. The Pandavas are still alive." Speaking unto one another thus and blaming Purusharthas for his carelessness, they then entered the city of Hastinapura with cheerless and sorrowful hearts. Beholding the mighty sons of Pritha, escaped from the burning house of Lak and allied with Drupada, and thinking of Drishtadyumna and Sikandin and the other sons of Drupada all accomplished in fight, they were struck with fear and overcome with despair. Then Vidura, having learnt that Draupadi had been won by the Pandavas and that the sons of Dhritarashtra had come back to Hastinapura, in shame, their pride humiliated, became filled with joy. And, O king, approaching Dhritarashtra, Kshatri said, "The Kurus are prospering by good luck." Hearing those words of Vidura, the son of Vichitravirya, wondering, said in great glee, "What good luck, O Vidura? What good luck?" From ignorance, the blind monarch understood that his eldest son Duryodhana had been chosen by Drupada's daughter as her lord. And the king immediately ordered various ornaments to be made for Draupadi. And he commanded that both Draupadi and his son Duryodhana should be brought with pomp to Hastinapura. It was then that Vidura told the monarch that Draupadi had chosen the Pandavas for her lords, and that those heroes were all alive and at peace, and that they had been received with great respect by King Drupada. And he also informed Dhritarashtra that the Pandavas had been united with the many relatives and friends of Drupada, each owning large armies, and with many others who had come to that self-choice. Hearing these words of Vidura, Dhritarashtra said, "Those children are to me as dear as they were to Pandu. Nay, more. Oh, listen to me why my affection for them now is even greater. The heroic sons of Pandu are well and at ease. They have obtained many friends. Their relatives, and others whom they have gained as allies, are all endued with great strength. Who amongst monarchs in prosperity or adversity would not like to have Drupada with his relatives as an ally?" Vyasa continued, "Having heard these words of the monarch, Vidura said, O king, let thy understanding remain so without change for 100 years. Having said this, Vidura returned to his own abode. Then, O monarch, there came unto Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, and the son of Radha, Karna. Addressing the monarch, they said, "We cannot, O king, speak of any transgression in the presence of Vidura. We have now found thee alone, and will, therefore, say all we like. What is this that thou hast, O monarch, desired to do? Dost thou regard the prosperity of thy foes as if it were thy own, that thou hast been applauding the Pandavas, O foremost of men, in the presence of Vidura? O sinless one, thou actest not, O king, in the way thou shouldst. O father, we should now act every day in such a way as to weaken the strength of the Pandavas. The time hath come, O father, for us to take counsel together, so that the Pandavas may not swallow us all with our children and friends and relatives." Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 203. Vyasa said, Dhritarashtra replied saying, "I desire to do exactly what you would recommend. But I do not wish to inform Vidura of it even by a change of muscle. It was, therefore, O son, that I was applauding the Pandavas in Vidura's presence, so that he might not know even by a sign what is in my mind. Now that Vidura hath gone away, this is the time, O Suyodhana, Duryodhana, for telling me what thou hast hit upon, and what, O Radheya, Karna, thou too hast hit upon." Duryodhana said, "Let us, O father, by means of trusted and skillful and adroit Brahmanas, seek to produce dissensions between the sons of Kunti and Madri. Or, let King Drupada and his sons, and all his ministers of state, be plied with presents of large wealth, so that they may abandon the cause of Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti. Or, let our spies induce the Pandavas to settle in Drupada's dominions, by describing to them, separately, the inconvenience of residing in Hastinapura, so that, separated from as, they may permanently settle in Panchala. Or, let some clever spies, full of resources, sowing the seeds of dissension among the Pandavas, make them jealous of one another. Or, let them incite Krishna against her husbands. She has many lords, and this will not present any difficulty. Or, let some seek to make the Pandavas themselves dissatisfied with Krishna, in which case Krishna also will be dissatisfied with them. Or, let, O king, some clever spies, repairing thither, secretly compass the death of Bhimasena. Bhima is the strongest of them all. Relying upon Bhima alone, the Pandavas used to disregard us of old. Bhima is fierce and brave and the sole refuge of the Pandavas. If he be slain, the others will be deprived of strength and energy. Deprived of Bhima, who is their sole refuge, they will no longer strive to regain their kingdom. Arjuna, O king, is invincible in battle, if Bhima protecteth him from behind. Without Bhima, Arjuna is not equal to even a fourth part of Radheya. Indeed, O king, the Pandavas, conscious of their own feebleness without Bhima and of our strength, would not really strive to recover the kingdom. Or, if, O monarch, coming hither, they prove docile and obedient to us, we would then seek to repress them according to the dictates of political science, as explained by Kanika. Or, we may tempt them by means of handsome girls, upon which the princess of Panchala will get annoyed with them. Or, O Radheya, let messengers be dispatched to bring them hither, so that, when arrived, we may through trusted agents, by some of the above methods, cause them to be slain. Strive, O father, to employ any of these various methods that may appear to thee faultless. Time passeth. Before their confidence in King Drupada that bull amongst kings is established, we may succeed, O monarch, to encounter them. But after their confidence hath been established in Drupada, we are sure to fail. These, O father, are my views for the discomfiture of the Pandavas. Judge whether they be good or bad. What, O Karna, dost thou think? Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 204. Vyasa said, thus addressed by Duryodhana, Karna said, It doth not seem to me, O Duryodhana, that thy reasoning is well-founded. O perpetuator of the Kuru race, no method will succeed against the Pandavas. O brave prince, thou hast before, by various subtle means, striven to carry out thy wishes. But ever hast thou failed to slay thy foes. They were then living near thee, O king. They were then unfledged and of tender years, but thou couldst not injure them then. They are now living at a distance, grown up, full-fledged. The sons of Kunti, O thou of firm resolution, cannot now be injured by any subtle contrivances of thine. This is my opinion. As they are aided by the very fates, and as they are desirous of regaining their ancestral kingdom, we can never succeed in injuring them by any means in our power. It is impossible to create disunion amongst them. They can never be disunited who have all taken to a common wife. Nor can we succeed in estranging Krishna from the Pandavas by any spies of ours. She chose them as her lords when they were in adversity. Will she abandon them now that they are in prosperity? Besides, women always like to have many husbands. Krishna hath obtained her wish. She can never be estranged from the Pandavas. The king of Panchala is honest and virtuous. He is not avaricious. Even if we offer him our whole kingdom, he will not abandon the Pandavas. Drupada's son also possesseth every accomplishment, and is attached to the Pandavas. Therefore, I do not think that the Pandavas can now be injured by any subtle means in thy power. But, O bull amongst men, this is what is good and advisable for us now, viz., to attack and smite them till they are exterminated. Let this course recommend itself to thee. As long as our party is strong and that of the king of the Panchalas is weak, so long strike them without any scruple. O son of Gandhari, as long as their innumerable vehicles and animals, friends, and friendly tribes are not mustered together, continue, O king, to exhibit thy prowess. As long as the king of the Panchalas together with his sons gifted with great prowess, setteth not his heart upon fighting with us, so long, O king, exhibit thy prowess. And, O king, exert thy prowess before he of the Vrishni race, Krishna, cometh with the Yadava host into the city of Drupada, carrying everything before him, to restore the Pandavas to their paternal kingdom. Wealth, every article of enjoyment, kingdom, there is nothing that Krishna may not sacrifice for the sake of the Pandavas. The illustrious Bharata had acquired the whole earth by his prowess alone. Indra hath acquired sovereignty of the three worlds by prowess alone. O king, prowess is always applauded by the Kshatriyas. O bull amongst Kshatriyas, prowess is the cardinal virtue of the brave. Let us, therefore, O monarch, with our large army consisting of 4 kinds of forces, grind Drupada without loss of time, and bring hither the Pandavas. Indeed, the Pandavas are incapable of being discomfited by any policy of conciliation, of gift, of wealth and bribery, or of disunion. Vanquish them, therefore, by thy prowess. And vanquishing them by thy prowess, rule thou this wide earth. O monarch, I see not any other means by which we may accomplish our end. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of Ratheya, Dhritarashtra, endued with great strength, applauded him highly. The monarch then addressed him and said, Thou, O son of Asuta, art gifted with great wisdom and accomplished in arms. This speech, therefore, favoring the exhibition of prowess suiteth thee well. But let Bhisma, and Drona, and Vidura, and you too, take counsel together and adopt that proposal which may lead to our benefit. Vyasa continued, Then King Dhritarashtra called unto him all those celebrated ministers and took counsel with them. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 205. Vyasa said, asked by Dhritarashtra to give his opinion, Bhishma replied, O Dhritarashtra, a quarrel with the Pandavas is what I can never approve of. As thou art to me, so was Pandu without doubt. And the sons of Gandhari are to me, as those of Kunti. I should protect them as well as I should thy sons, O Dhritarashtra. And, O king, the Pandavas are as much near to me as they are to Prince Duryodhana or to all the other Kurus. Under these circumstances, a quarrel with them is what I never like. Concluding a treaty with those heroes, let half the land be given unto them. This is without doubt the paternal kingdom of those foremost ones of the Kuru race. And, O Duryodhana, like thee who lookest upon this kingdom as thy paternal property, the Pandavas also look upon it as their paternal possession. If the renowned sons of Pandu obtain not the kingdom, how can it be thine, or that of any other descendant of the Bharata race? If thou regardest thyself as one that hath lawfully come into the possession of the kingdom, I think they also may be regarded to have lawfully come into the possession of this kingdom before thee. Give them half the kingdom quietly. This, O tiger among men, is beneficial to all. If thou actest otherwise, evil will befall us all. Thou too shalt be covered with dishonor. O Duryodhana, strive to maintain thy good name. A good name is, indeed, the source of one's strength. It hath been said that one liveth in vain whose reputation hath gone. A man, O Kaurava, doth not die so long as his fame lasteth. One liveth as long as one's fame endureth, and dieth when one's fame is gone. Follow thou, O son of Gandhari, the practice that is worthy of the Kuru race. O thou of mighty arms, imitate thy own ancestors. We are fortunate that the Pandavas have not perished. We are fortunate that Kunti liveth. We are fortunate that the wretch Purusharthas, without being able to accomplish his purpose, hath himself perished. From that time when I heard that the sons of Kuntabhoja's daughter had been burnt to death, I was, O son of Gandhari, ill able to meet any living creature. O tiger among men, hearing of the fate that overtook Kunti, the world doth not regard Purusharthas so guilty as it regardeth thee. O king, the escape, therefore, of the sons of Pandu with life from that conflagration and their reappearance, do away with thy evil repute. Know, O thou of Kuru's race, that as long as those heroes live, the wielder of the thunder himself cannot deprive them of their ancestral share in the kingdom. The Pandavas are virtuous and united. They are being wrongly kept out of their equal share in the kingdom. If thou shouldst act rightly, if thou shouldst do what is agreeable to me, if thou shouldst seek the welfare of all, then give half the kingdom unto them. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 206. Vyasa said, after Bhishma had concluded, Drona spoke, saying, O King Dhritarashtra, it hath been heard by us that friends summoned for consultation should always speak what is right, true, and conducive to fame. O sire, I am of the same mind in this matter with the illustrious Bhishma. Let a share of the kingdom be given unto the Pandavas. This is eternal virtue. Send, O Bharata, unto Drupada without loss of time some messenger of agreeable speech, carrying with him a large treasure for the Pandavas. And let the man go unto Drupada carrying costly presents for both the bridegrooms and the bride, and let him speak unto that monarch of thy increase of power and dignity arising from this new alliance with him. And, O monarch, let the man know also that both thyself and Duryodhana have become exceedingly glad in consequence of what hath happened. Let him say this repeatedly unto Drupada and Drishtadyumna. And let him speak also about the alliance as having been exceedingly proper and agreeable unto thee, and of thyself being worthy of it. And let the man repeatedly propitiate the sons of Kunti and those of Madri in proper words. And at thy command, O king, let plenty of ornaments of pure gold be given unto Draupadi. And let, O bull of Bharata's race, proper presents be given unto all the sons of Drupada. Let the messenger then propose the return of the Pandavas to Hastinapura. After the heroes will have been permitted, by Drupada, to come hither, let Dusasana and Vikarna go out with a handsome train to receive them. And when they will have arrived at Hastinapura, let those foremost of men be received with affection by thee. And let them then be installed on their paternal throne, agreeably to the wishes of the people of the realm. This, O monarch of Bharata's race, is what I think should be thy behavior towards the Pandavas who are to thee even as thy own sons. Vyasa continued, after Drona had ceased, Karna spake again, both Bhisma and Drona have been pampered with wealth that is thine and favors conferred by thee. They are also always regarded by thee as thy trusted friends. What can therefore be more amusing than that they both should give thee advice which is not for thy good? How can the wise approve that advice which is pronounced good by a person speaking with wicked intent, but taking care to conceal the wickedness of his heart? Indeed, in a season of distress, friends can neither benefit nor injure. Everyone's happiness or the reverse dependeth on destiny. He that is wise and he that is foolish, he that is young in years and he that is old, he that hath allies and he that hath none, all become, it is seen everywhere, happy or unhappy at times. It hath been heard by us that there was, of old, a king by name Mvuvicha. Having his capital at Rajagriha, he was the king of all the Magadha chiefs. He never attended to his affairs. All his exertion consisted in inhaling the air. All his affairs were in the hands of his minister. And his minister, named Mahakarni, became the supreme authority in the state. Regarding himself all-powerful, he began to disregard the king. And the rich himself appropriated everything belonging unto the king, his queens and treasures and sovereignty. But the possession of all these, instead of satisfying his avarice, only served to inflame him the more. Having appropriated everything belonging to the king, he even coveted the throne. But it hath been heard by us that, with all his best endeavors, he succeeded not in acquiring the kingdom of the monarch, his master, even though the latter was inattentive to business and content with only breathing the air. What else can be said, O king, than that monarch's sovereignty was dependent on destiny? If, therefore, O king, this kingdom be established in thee by destiny, it will certainly continue in thee, even if the whole world were to become thy enemy. If, however, destiny hath ordained otherwise, howsoever mayest thou strive, it will not last in thee. O learned one, remembering all this, judge of the honesty or otherwise of thy advisers. Ascertain also who amongst them are wicked and who have spoken wisely and well. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of Karna, Drona replied, as thou art wicked, it is evident thou sayest so in consequence of the wickedness of thy intent. It is for injuring the Pandavas that thou findest fault with us. But know, O Karna, what I have said is for the good of all and the prosperity of the Kuru race. If thou regardest all this as productive of evil, declare thyself what is for our good. If the good advice I have given be not followed, I think the Kurus will be exterminated in no time. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 207. Vyasa said, after Drona had ceased, Vidura spoke, saying, O monarch, thy friends without doubt are saying unto thee what is for thy good. But as thou art unwilling to listen to what they say, their words scarcely find a place in thy ears. What that foremost one of Kuru's race, viz., Bhishma, the son of Santanu, hath said, is excellent and is for thy good. But thou dost not listen to it. The preceptor Drona also hath said much that is for thy good, which however Karna, the son of Artha, doth not regard to be such. But, O king, reflecting hard, I do not find anyone who is better a friend to thee than either of these two lions among men, viz., Bhisma and Drona, or anyone who excels either of them in wisdom. These two, old in years, in wisdom, and in learning, always regard thee, O king, and the sons of Pandu with equal eyes. Without doubt, O king of Bharata's race, they are both, in virtue and truthfulness, not inferior to Rama, the son of Dasaratha, and Gaya. Never before did they give thee any evil advice. Thou also, O monarch, hast never done them any injury. Why should, therefore, these tigers among men, who are ever truthful, give thee wicked advice, especially when thou hast never injured them? Endued with wisdom, these foremost of men, O king, will never give thee counsels that are crooked. O scion of Kuru's rate, this is my firm conviction that these two, acquainted with all rules of morality, will never, tempted by wealth, utter anything betraying a spirit of partisanship. What they have said, O Bharata, I regard highly beneficial to thee. Without doubt, O monarch, the Pandavas are thy sons as much as Duryodhana and others are. Those ministers, therefore, that give thee any counsel fraught with evil unto the Pandavas, do not really look to thy interests. If there is any partiality in thy heart, O king, for thy own children, they who by their counsel seek to bring it out, certainly do thee no good. Therefore, O king, these illustrious persons endued with great splendor have not, I think, said anything that leadeth to evil. Thou, however, dost not understand it. What these bulls among men have said regarding the invincibility of the Pandavas is perfectly true. Think not otherwise of it, O tiger among men. Blessed be thou. Can the handsome Dhananjaya, the son of Pandu, using the right and the left hand with equal activity, be vanquished in battle even by Maghavat himself? Can the great Bhimasena of strong arms, possessing the might of 10,000 elephants, be vanquished in battle by the immortals themselves? Who also that desireth to live can overcome in battle the twins, Nagula and Sadeva, like unto the sons of Yama himself, and well skilled in fight? How too can the eldest one of the Pandavas, in whom patience, mercy, forgiveness, truth, and prowess always live together, be vanquished? They who have Rama, Valadeva, as their ally, and Janardana, Krishna, as their counselor, and Satyaki as their partisan, have already defeated everybody in war. They who have Drupada for their father-in-law, and Drupada's sons their heroic brothers, viz., Drishtadyumna and others of Prashada's race for their brothers-in-law, are certainly invincible. Remembering this, O monarch, and knowing that their claim to the kingdom is even prior to thine, behave virtuously towards them. The stain of calumny is on thee, O monarch, in consequence of that act of Purakana. Wash thyself of it now, by a kindly behavior towards the Pandavas. This kindly behavior of thine, O monarch, towards the Pandavas will be an act of great benefit to us, protecting the lives of us all that belong to Kuru's race, and leading to the growth of the whole Kshatriya order. We had formerly warred with King Drupada. If we can now secure him as an ally, it will strengthen our party. The Dasaras, O king, are numerous and strong. Know where Krishna is, all of them must be, and where Krishna is, their victory also must be. O king, who, unless cursed by the gods, would seek to effect that by means of war which can be effected by conciliation. Hearing that the sons of Pritha are alive, the citizens and other subjects of the realm have become exceedingly glad and eager for beholding them. O monarch, act in a way that is agreeable to them. Duryodhana and Karna and Sakuni, the son of Suvala, are sinful, foolish, and young. Listen not to them. Possessed of every virtue thou art, I long ago told thee, O monarch, that for Duryodhana's fault, the subjects of this kingdom would be exterminated. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 208. Vyasa said, hearing these various speeches, Dhritarashtra said, the learned Bhishma, the son of Santanu, and the illustrious Rishi Drona, and thyself also, O Vidura, have said the truth and what also is most beneficial to me. Indeed, as those mighty Kar warriors, the heroic sons of Kunti, are the children of Pandu, so are they, without doubt, my children according to the ordinance. And as my sons are entitled to this kingdom, so are the sons of Pandu certainly entitled to it. Therefore, hasten to bring hither the Pandavas along with their mother, treating them with affectionate consideration. O thou of Bharata's race, bring also Krishna of celestial beauty along with them. From sheer good fortune the sons of Pritha are alive, and from good fortune alone those mighty Kar warriors have obtained the daughter of Drupada. It is from good fortune alone that our strength hath increased, and it is from good fortune alone that Purukana hath perished. O thou of great splendor, it is from good fortune that my great grief hath been killed. Vaisampayana continued, Then Vidura, at the command of Dhritarashtra, repaired, O Bharata, unto Yajnasena and the Pandavas. And he repaired thither carrying with him numerous jewels and various kinds of wealth for Draupadi and the Pandavas and Yajnasena also. Arrived at Drupada's abode, Vidura, conversant with every rule of morality and deep in every science, properly accosted the monarch and waited upon him. Drupada received Vidura in proper form, and they both inquired after each other's welfare. Vidura then saw there the Pandavas and Vasudeva. As soon as he saw them, he embraced them from affection and inquired after their well-being. The Pandavas also, along with Vasudeva, in due order, worshipped Vidura of immeasurable intelligence. But Vidura, O king, in the name of Dhritarashtra, repeatedly inquired with great affection after their welfare. He then gave, O monarch, unto the Pandavas and Kunti and Draupadi, and unto Drupada and Drupada's sons, the gems and various kinds of wealth that the Kauravas had sent through him. Possessed of immeasurable intelligence, the modest Vidura then, in the presence of the Pandavas and Keshava, addressed the well-behaved Drupada thus. With thy ministers and sons, O monarch, listen to what I say. King Dhritarashtra, with ministers, sons, and friends, hath with a joyous heart, O king, repeatedly inquired after thy welfare. And, O monarch, he hath been highly pleased with this alliance with thee. So also, O king, Bhisma of great wisdom, the son of Santanu, with all the Kurus, inquired after thy welfare in every respect. Drona also of great wisdom, the son of Bharadvaja and thy dear friend, embracing thee mentally, inquired of thy happiness. And, O king of Panchalas, Dhritarashtra and all the Kurus, in consequence of this alliance with thee, regard themselves supremely blessed. O Yajnasena, the establishment of this alliance with thee hath made them happier than if they had acquired a new kingdom. Knowing all this, O monarch, permit the Pandavas to revisit their ancestral kingdom. The Kurus are exceedingly eager to behold the sons of Pandu. These bulls among men have been long absent from their kingdom. They as well as Pritha must be very eager to behold their city. And all the Kuru ladies and the citizens and our subjects are eagerly waiting to behold Krishna, the Panchala princess. This, therefore, is my opinion, O monarch, that thou shouldst, without delay, permit the Pandavas to go thither with their wife. And after the illustrious Pandavas, O king, will have received thy permission to go thither, I shall send information unto Dhritarashtra by quick messengers. Then, O king, will the Pandavas set out with Kunti and Krishna. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 209. Vaisampayana said, hearing these words of Vidura, Drupada said, It is even so as thou, O Vidura of great wisdom, hast said. Venerable one, I too have been exceedingly happy in consequence of this alliance. It is highly proper that these illustrious princes should return to their ancestral kingdom. But it is not proper for me to say this myself. If the brave son of Kunti viz., Yudhishthira, if Bhima and Arjuna, if these bulls among men, viz., the twins, themselves desire to go, and if Rama, Valadeva, and Krishna, both acquainted with every rule of morality, be of the same mind, then let the Pandavas go thither. For these tigers among men, Rama and Krishna, are ever engaged in doing what is agreeable and beneficial to the sons of Pandu. Hearing this, Yudhishthira said, We are now, O monarch, with all our younger brothers, dependent on thee. We shall cheerfully do what thou art pleased to command. Vaisampayana continued, Then Vasudeva said, I am of opinion that the Pandavas should go. But we should all abide by the opinion of King Drupada, who is conversant with every rule of morality. Drupada then spoke, I certainly agree with what this foremost of men thinketh, having regard to the circumstances. For the illustrious sons of Pandu now are to me as they are, without doubt, to Vasudeva. Kunti's son Yudhishthira himself doth not seek the welfare of the Pandavas so earnestly as Kesva, that tiger among men. Vaisampayana continued, commanded by the illustrious Drupada, the Pandavas, then, O king, and Krishna and Vidura, taking with them Krishna, the daughter of Drupada, and the renowned Kunti, journeyed towards the city called after the elephant, stopping at various places along the way for purposes of pleasure and enjoyment. King Dhritarashtra, hearing that those heroes had neared the capital, sent out the Kauravas to receive them. They who were thus sent out were, O Bharata, the Karna of the great bow, and Chitrangada, and Drona that foremost of warriors, and Kripa of Gautama's line. Surrounded by these, those mighty heroes, their splendor enhanced by that throng, slowly entered the city of Hastinapura. The whole city became radiant, as it were, with the gay throng of sightseers animated by curiosity. Those tigers among men gladdened the hearts of all who beheld them. And the Pandavas, dear unto the hearts of the people, heard, as they proceeded, various exclamations with the citizens, ever desirous of obeying the wishes of those princes, loudly uttered. Some exclaimed, Here returns that tiger among men, conversant with all the rules of morality, and who always protects us as if we were his nearest relatives. And elsewhere they said, It seems that King Pandu the beloved of his people returneth today from the forest, doubtless to do what is agreeable to us. And there were some that said, What good is not done to us today when the heroic sons of Kunti come back to our town? If we have ever given away in charity, if we have ever poured libations of clarified butter on the fire, if we have any ascetic merit, let the Pandavas, by virtue of all those acts, stay in our town for 100 years. At last the Pandavas, on arriving at the place, worshipped the feet of Dhritarashtra, as also those of the illustrious Bhisma. They also worshipped the feet of everybody else that deserved that honor. And they inquired after the welfare of every citizen, there present. At last, at the command of Dhritarashtra, they entered the chambers that had been assigned to them. After they had rested there for some time, they were summoned to the court by King Dhritarashtra and Bhisma, the son of Santanu. When they came, King Dhritarashtra, addressing Yudhishthira, said, Listen, O son of Kunti, with thy brothers, to what I say. Repair ye to Pandavaprastha, so that no difference may arise again between you and your cousins. If you take up your quarters, then no one will be able to do you any injury. Protected by Partha, Arjuna, like the celestials by the thunderbolt, reside ye at Pandavaprastha, taking half of the kingdom. Vaisampayana continued, agreeing to what Dhritarashtra said. Those bulls among men worshipping the king set out from Hastinapura. And content with half the kingdom, they removed to Pandavaprastha, which was an unreclaimed desert. Then those heroes of unfading splendor, viz., the Pandavas, with Krishna at their head, arriving there, beautified the place and made it a second heaven. And those mighty car warriors, selecting with Dwaipayana's assistance a sacred and auspicious region, performed certain propitiatory ceremonies and measured out a piece of land for their city. Then, surrounded by a trench wide as the sea and by walls reaching high up to the heavens and white as the fleecy clouds or the rays of the moon, that foremost of cities looked resplendent like Bhagavati, the capital of the nether kingdom, decked with the Nagas. And it stood adorned with palatial mansions and numerous gates, each furnished with a couple of panels resembling the outstretched wings of Garuda. And it was protected with gateways looking like the clouds and high as the Mandara mountains. And well furnished with numerous weapons of attack, the missiles of the foes could not make slightest impression on them. And they were almost covered with darts and other missiles like double-tongued snakes. The turrets along the walls were filled with armed men in course of training, and the walls were lined with numerous warriors along their whole length. And there were thousands of sharp hooks and satagnis, machines slaying a century of warriors, and numerous other machines on the battlements. There were also large iron wheels planted on them. And with all these was that foremost of cities adorned. The streets were all wide and laid out excellently, and there was no fear in them of accident. And decked with innumerable mansions, the city became like unto Amravati, and came to be called Indraprastha, like unto Indra's city. In a delightful and auspicious part of the city rose the palace of the Pandavas, filled with every kind of wealth, and like unto the mansion of the celestial treasurer, Kuvara, himself. and it looked like a mass of clouds charged with lightning. When the city was built, there came, O king, numerous Brahmanas well acquainted with all the Vedas and conversant with every language, wishing to dwell there. And there came also unto that town numerous merchants from every direction, in the hope of earning wealth. There also came numerous persons well skilled in all the arts, wishing to take up their abode there. And around the city were laid out many delightful gardens adorned with numerous trees bearing both fruits and flowers. There were amaras, mango trees, and amratakas, and kadamvas, and asokas, and champakas, and panagas, and nagas, and lakuchas, and panasas, and salas, and talas, palm trees, and tamalas, and vaculas, and katakas with their fragrant loads, beautiful and blossoming, and grand amalakas with branches bent down with the weight of fruits, and lodras, and blossoming, and kolas, and jamvas, blackberry trees, and padalas, and kunjakas, and adamuktas, and caraveras, and parihatas, and numerous other kinds of trees, always adorned with flowers and fruits, and alive with feathery creatures of various species. And those verdant groves always resounded with the notes of maddened peacocks and kokilas, blackbirds. And there were various pleasure houses, bright as mirrors, and numerous bowers of creepers, and charming and artificial hillocks, and many lakes full to the brim of crystal water, and delightful tanks fragrant with lotuses and lilies, and adorned with swans and ducks and chakravakas, Brahmani ducks. And there were many delicious pools overgrown with fine aquatic plants. And there were also diverse ponds of great beauty and large dimension. And, O king, the joy of the Pandavas increased from day to day, in consequence of their residence in that large kingdom that was peopled with pious men. Thus, in consequence of the virtuous behavior of Bhisma and King Dhritarashtra towards them, the Pandavas took up their abode in Kandavaprastha. Adorned with those 5 mighty warriors, each equal unto Indra himself, that foremost of cities looked like Bhagavati, the capital of the nether kingdom, adorned with the Nagas. And, O monarch, having settled the Pandavas there, the heroic Krishna, obtaining their leave, came back with Rama to Dwaravati. Rajyalabha Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 210. Janamejaya said, O thou possessed of ascetic wealth, what did those high-souled ones, my grandsires, the illustrious Pandavas, do, after obtaining the kingdom of Indraprastha? How did their wife Draupadi obey them all? How is it also that no dissensions arose amongst those illustrious rulers of men, all attached to one wife, viz., Krishna? O thou of the wealth of asceticism, I wish to hear everything in detail regarding the behavior towards one another of those rulers of men after their union with Krishna. Vyasa said, those scorchers of foes, the Pandavas, having obtained their kingdom at the command of Dhritarashtra, passed their days in joy and happiness at Kandavaprastha with Krishna. And Yudhishthira, endued with great energy and ever adhering to truth, having obtained the sovereignty, virtuously ruled the land, assisted by his brothers. And the sons of Pandu, endued with great wisdom and devoted to truth and virtue, having vanquished all their foes, continued to live there in great happiness. And those bulls among men, seated on royal seats of great value, used to discharge all the duties of government. And one day, while all those illustrious heroes were so seated, there came unto them the celestial Rishi Narada, in course of his wanderings. Beholding the Rishi, Yudhishthira offered him his own handsome seat. And after the celestial Rishi had been seated, the wise Yudhishthira duly offered him the aragya with his own hands. And the king also informed the Rishi of the state of his kingdom. The Rishi, accepting the worship, became well pleased, and eulogizing him with benedictions, commanded the king to take his seat. Commanded by the Rishi, the king took his seat. Then the king sent word unto Krishna, in the inner apartments, of the arrival of the illustrious one. Hearing of the Rishi's arrival, Draupadi, purifying herself properly, came with a respectful attitude to where Narada was with the Pandavas. The virtuous princess of Panchala, worshipping the celestial Rishi's feet, stood with joined hands before him, properly veiled. The illustrious Narada, pronouncing various benedictions on her, commanded the princess to retire. After Krishna had retired, the illustrious Rishi, addressing in private all the Pandavas with Yudhishthira at their head, said, The renowned princess of Panchala is the wedded wife of you all. Establish a rule amongst yourselves so that disunion may not arise amongst you. There were, in former days, celebrated throughout the three worlds, two brothers named Sunda and Upasunda living together and incapable of being slain by anybody unless each slew the other. They ruled the same kingdom, lived in the same house, slept on the same bed, sat on the same seat, and ate from the same dish. And yet they killed each for the sake of Tilottama. Therefore, O Yudhishthira, preserve your friendship for one another and do that which may not produce disunion amongst you. On hearing this, Yudhishthira asked, O great Muni, whose sons were Asuras called Sunda and Upasunda, whence arose that dissension amongst them, and why did they slay each other? Whose daughter also was this Tilottama for whose love the Mandan brothers killed each other? Was she an Apsara, water nymph, or the daughter of any celestial? O thou whose wealth is asceticism, we desire, O Brahmana, to hear in detail everything as it happened. Indeed, our curiosity hath become great. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 211. Vyasa said, hearing these words of Yudhishthira, Narada replied, O son of Pritha, listen with thy brothers to me as I recite this old story, O Yudhishthira, exactly as everything happened. In olden days, a mighty Daigya named Nikumba, endued with great energy and strength, was born in the race of the great Asura, Hiranyakasipu. Unto this Nikumba were born two sons called Sunda and Upasunda. Both of them were mighty Asuras endued with great energy and terrible prowess. The brothers were both fierce and possessed of wicked hearts. And those Daigyas were both of the same resolution, and ever engaged in achieving the same tasks and ends. They were ever sharers with each other in happiness as well as in woe. Each speaking and doing what was agreeable to the other, the brothers never were unless they were together, and never went anywhere unless together. Of exactly the same disposition and habits, they seemed to be one individual divided into two parts. Endued with great energy and ever of the same resolution in everything they undertook, the brothers gradually grew up. Always entertaining the same purpose, desirous of subjugating the three worlds, the brothers, after due initiation, went to the mountains of Vindhya. And severe were the ascetic penances they performed there. Exhausted with hunger and thirst, with matted locks on their heads and attired in barks of trees, they acquired sufficient ascetic merit at length. Besmearing themselves with dirt from head to foot, living upon air alone, standing on their toes, they threw pieces of the flesh of their bodies into the fire. Their arms upraised, and eye fixed, long was the period for which they observed their vows. And during the course of their ascetic penances, a wonderful incident occurred there. For the mountains of Vindhya, heated for a long course of years by the power of their ascetic austerities, began to emit vapor from every part of their bodies. And beholding the severity of their austerities, the celestials became alarmed. The gods began to cause numerous obstructions to impede the progress of their asceticism. The celestials repeatedly tempted the brothers by means of every precious possession and the most beautiful girls. The brothers broke not their vows. Then the celestials once more manifested, before the illustrious brothers, their powers of illusion. For it seemed their sisters, mothers, wives, and other relatives, with disordered hair and ornaments and robes, were running towards them in terror, pursued and struck by a Rakshasa with a lance in hand. And it seemed that the women implored the help of the brothers, crying, "O save us!" But all this went for nothing, for firmly wedded thereto, the brothers did not still break their vows. And when it was found that all this produced not the slightest impression on any of the two, both the women and the Rakshasa vanished from sight. At last the grandsire himself, the Supreme Lord ever seeking the welfare of all, came unto those great Asuras and asked them to solicit the boon they desired. Then the brothers Sunda and Upasunda, both of great prowess, beholding the grandsire, rose from their seats and waited with joined palms. And the brothers both said unto the god, O grandsire, if thou hast been pleased with these our ascetic austerities, and art, O Lord, propitious unto us, then let us have knowledge of all weapons and of all powers of illusion. Let us be endued with great strength, and let us be able to assume any form at will. And last of all, let us also be immortal. Hearing these words of theirs, Brahman said, Accept the immortality you ask for, you shall be given all that you desire. Solicit you some form of death by which you may still be equal unto the immortals. And since you have undergone these severe ascetic austerities from desire of sovereignty alone, I cannot confer on you the boon of immortality. You have performed your ascetic penances even for the subjugation of the three worlds. It is for this, O mighty Daityas, that I cannot grant you what you desire. Narada continued, hearing these words of Brahman, Sunda and Upasunda said, O grandsire, let us have no fear then from any created thing, mobile or immobile, in the three worlds, except only from each other. The grandsire then said, I grant you what you have asked for, even this your desire. And granting them this boon, the grandsire made them desist from their asceticism and return to his own region. Then the brothers, those mighty Daityas, having received those several boons, became incapable of being slain by anybody in the universe. They then returned to their own abode. All their friends and relatives, beholding those Daityas of great intelligence, crowned with success in the matter of the boons they had obtained, became exceedingly glad. And Sunda and Upasunda then cut off their matted locks and wore coronets on their heads. Attired in costly robes and ornaments, they looked exceedingly handsome. They caused the moon to rise over their city every night, even out of his season. And friends and relatives gave themselves up to joy and merriment with happy hearts. Eat, feed, give, make merry, sing, drink, these were the sounds heard every day in every house. And here and there arose loud uproars of hilarity mixed with clappings of hands, which filled the whole city of the Daityas, who, being capable of assuming any form at will, were engaged in every kind of amusement and sport and scarcely noticed the flight of time, even regarding a whole year as a single day. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 212. Narada continued, as soon as those festivities came to an end, the brothers Sunda and Upasunda, desirous of the sovereignty of the three worlds, took counsel and commanded their forces to be arranged. Obtaining the assent of their friends and relatives, of the elders of the Daitya race and of their ministers of state, and performing the preliminary rites of departure, they set out in the night when the constellation Magha was in the ascendant. The brothers set out with a large Daitya force clad in mail and armed with maces and axes and lances and clubs. The Daitya heroes set out on their expedition with joyous hearts, the Charanas, bards, chanting auspicious panegyrics indicative of their future triumphs. Furious in war, the Daitya brothers, capable of going everywhere at will, ascended the skies and went to the region of the celestials. The celestials, knowing they were coming and acquainted also with the boons granted unto them by the supreme deity, left heaven and sought refuge in the region of Brahman. Endued with fierce prowess, the Daitya heroes soon subjugated the region of Indra, and vanquishing the diverse tribes of Yakshas and Rakshasas and every creature ranging the skies, came away. Those mighty car warriors next subjugated the Nagas of the nether region, and then the inmates of the ocean, and then all the tribes of the Mlechchas. Desirous next of subjugating the whole earth, those heroes of irresistible sway, summoning their soldiers, issued these cruel commands: Brahmanas and royal sages, on earth, with their libations and other food offered at grand sacrifices, increase the energy and strength of the gods, as also their prosperity. Engaged in such acts, they are the enemies of the Asuras. All of us, therefore, mustering together, should completely slaughter them off the face of the earth. Ordering their soldiers thus on the eastern shore of the great ocean, and entertaining such a cruel resolution, the Asura brothers set out in all directions. And those that were performing sacrifices, and the Brahmanas that were assisting at those sacrifices, the mighty brothers instantly slew. And slaughtering them with violence, they departed for some other place. Whilst their soldiers threw into the water the sacrificial fires that were in the asylums of Munis with souls under complete control, the curses uttered by the illustrious rishis in wrath, rendered abortive by the boons granted by Brahman, affected not the Asura brothers. When the Brahmanas saw that their curses produced not the slightest effect, like shafts shot at stones, they fled in all directions, forsaking their rites and vows. Even those rishis on earth that were crowned with ascetic success, and had their passions under complete control, and were wholly engrossed in meditation of the deity, from fear of the Asura brothers, fled like snakes at the approach of Vinata's son, Garuda the snake-eater. The sacred asylums were all trodden down and broken. The sacrificial jars and vessels being broken, their sacred contents were scattered over the ground. The whole universe became empty, as if its creatures had all been stricken down during the season of general dissolution. And, O king, after the rishis had all disappeared and made themselves invisible, both the great asuras, resolved upon their destruction, began to assume various forms. Assuming the forms of maddened elephants with temples rent from excessive juice, the asura pair, searching out the rishis who had sheltered themselves in caves, sent them to the region of Yama. Sometimes becoming as lions and again as tigers and disappearing the next moment. By these and other methods the cruel couple, seeing the rishis, slew them instantly. Sacrifice and study ceased, and kings and brahmanas were exterminated. The earth became utterly destitute of sacrifices and festivals. And the terrified people uttered cries of "Oh" and "Alas," and all buying and selling were stopped. All religious rites ceased, and the earth became destitute of sacred ceremonies and marriages. Agriculture was neglected and cattle were no longer tended. Towns and asylums became desolate. And scattered over with bones and skeletons, the earth assumed a frightful aspect. All ceremonies in honor of the Pitris were suspended, and the sacred sound of Vashit and the whole circle of auspicious rites ceased. The earth became frightful to behold. The sun and the moon, the planets and stars, and constellations, and the other dwellers in the firmament, witnessing these acts of Sunda and Upasunda, grieved deeply. Subjugating all the points of heaven by means of such cruel acts, the Asura brothers took up their abode in Kurukshetra without a single rival. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 213. Narada continued, Then the celestial rishis, the siddhas, and the high-souled rishis possessing the attributes of tranquility and self-restraint, beholding that act of universal slaughter, were afflicted with great grief. With passions and senses and souls under complete control, they then went to the abode of the grandsire, moved by compassion for the universe. Arrived there, they beheld the grandsire seated with gods, siddhas, and brahmarshis around him. There were present that god of gods, viz., Mahadeva, and Agni, accompanied by Vayu, and Soma, and Surya, and Sakra, and rishis devoted to the contemplation of Brahma, and the Vaikanasas, the Valakilyas, the Vanaprasthas, the Marichipas, the Ayas, the Avamudas, and other ascetics of great energy. All those rishis were sitting with the grandsire, when the celestial and other rishis, approaching Brahman with sorrowful hearts, represented unto him all the acts of Sunda and Upasunda. And they told the grandsire in detail everything that the Asura brothers had done, and how they had done it, and in what order. Then all the celestials and the great rishis pressed the matter before the grandsire. The grandsire, hearing everything they said, reflected for a moment and settled in his mind what he should do. Resolving to compass the destruction of the Asura brothers, he summoned Viswakarman, the celestial architect. Seeing Viswakarman before him, the grandsire, possessed of supreme ascetic merit, commanded him, saying, Create thou a damsel capable of captivating all hearts. Bowing down unto the grandsire and receiving his command with reverence, the great artificer of the universe created a celestial maiden with careful attention. Viswakrat first collected all handsome features upon the body of the damsel he created. Indeed, the celestial maiden that he created was almost a mass of gems. And created with great care by Viswakarman, the damsel, in beauty, became unrivaled among the women of the three worlds. There was not even a minute part of her body which by its wealth of beauty could not attract the gaze of beholders. And like unto the embodied Sri herself, that damsel of extraordinary beauty captivated the eyes and hearts of every creature. And because she had been created with portions of every gem taken in minute measures, the grandsire bestowed upon her the name of Tilotama. And as soon as he started it into life, the damsel bowed to Brahman and with joined palms said, Lord of every created thing, what task am I to accomplish and what have I been created for? The grandsire answered, Go, O Tilotama, unto the Asuras, Sunda and Upasunda. O amiable one, tempt them with thy captivating beauty. And, O damsel, conduct thyself there in such a way that the Asura brothers may, in consequence of the wealth of thy beauty, quarrel with each other as soon as they cast their eyes upon thee. Narada continued, bowing unto the grandsire and saying, So be it. The damsel walked round the celestial conclave. The illustrious Brahman was then sitting with face turned eastwards, and Mahadeva with face also towards the east, and all the celestials with faces northwards, and the rishis with faces towards all directions. While Tilottama walked round the conclave of the celestials, Indra and the illustrious Stanu, Mahadeva, were the only ones that succeeded in preserving their tranquility of mind. But exceedingly desirous as Mahadeva was of beholding Tilottama, when the damsel, in her progress round the celestial conclave, was at his side, another face like a full-blown lotus appeared on the southern side of his body. And when she was behind him, another face appeared on the west. And when the damsel was on the northern side of the great god, a fourth face appeared on the northern side of his body. Mahadeva, who was eager to behold the damsel, came also to have 1,000 eyes, each large and slightly reddish, before, behind, and on his flanks. And it was thus that Stanu the great god came to have 4 faces, and the slayer of Vala 1,000 eyes. And as regards the mass of the celestials and the rishis, they turned their faces towards all directions as Tilottama walked round them. Except the divine grandsire himself, the glances of those illustrious personages, even of all of them, fell upon Tilottama's body. And when Tilottama set out for the city of the Asuras, with the wealth of her beauty, all regarded the task as already accomplished. After Tilottama had gone away, the great god, who was the first cause of the universe, dismissed all the celestials and the rishis. Dismissed. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 214. Narada continued, meanwhile the Asura brothers, having subjugated the earth, were without a rival. The fatigue of exertion gone, they, having brought the 3 worlds under equal sway, regarded themselves as persons that had nothing more to do. Having brought all the treasures of the gods, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Nagas, the Rakshasas, and the kings of the earth, the brothers began to pass their days in great happiness. When they saw they had no rivals in the 3 worlds, they gave up all exertion and devoted their time to pleasure and merriment, like the celestials. They experienced great happiness by giving themselves up to every kind of enjoyment, such as women, and perfumes, and floral wreaths, and viands, and drinks, and many other agreeable objects, all in profusion. In houses and woods and gardens, on hills and in forests, wherever they liked, they passed their time in pleasure and amusement, like the immortals. And it so happened that one day they went for purposes of pleasure to a tableland of the Vindhya range, perfectly level and stony, and overgrown with blossoming trees. After every object of desire, all of the most agreeable kind, had been brought, the brothers sat on an excellent seat, with happy hearts and accompanied by handsome women. And those damsels, desirous of pleasing the brothers, commenced a dance in accompaniment to music, and sweetly chanted many a song in praise of the mighty pair. Meanwhile Tilottama, attired in a single piece of red silk that exposed all her charms, came along, plucking wild flowers on her way. She advanced slowly to where those mighty Asuras were. The Asura brothers, intoxicated with the large portions they had imbibed, were smitten upon beholding that maiden of transcendent beauty. Leaving their seats, they went quickly to where the damsel was. Both of them being under the influence of lust, each sought the maiden for himself. And Sunda seized that maid of fair brows by her right hand. Intoxicated with the boons they had obtained, with physical might, with the wealth and gems they had gathered from every quarter, and with the wine they had drunk, maddened with all these, and influenced by wishful desire, they addressed each other, each contracting his bow in anger. "She is my wife, and therefore your superior," said Sunda. "She is my wife, and therefore your sister-in-law," replied Upasunda. And they said unto each other, "She is mine, not yours." And soon they were under the influence of rage. Maddened by the beauty of the damsel, they soon forgot their love and affection for each other. Both of them, deprived of reason by passion, then took up their fierce maces, each repeating, "I was the first, I was the first," and taking her hand, struck the other. And the fierce Asuras, struck by each other with the mace, fell down upon the ground, their bodies bathed in blood, like 2 suns dislodged from the firmament. And beholding this, the women that had come there, and the other Asuras there present, all fled away trembling in grief and fear, and took refuge in the nether regions. The grandsire himself of pure soul then came there, accompanied by the celestials and the great rishis. And the illustrious grandsire applauded Tilottama and expressed his wish of granting her a boon. The supreme deity, before Tilottama spoke, desirous of granting her a boon, cheerfully said, "O beautiful damsel, thou shalt roam in the region of the Adityas. Thy splendor shall be so great that nobody will ever be able to look at thee for any length of time." The grandsire of all creatures, granting this boon unto her, establishing the three worlds and Indra as before, returned to his own region. Narada continued, "It was thus that Asuras, ever united and inspired by the same purpose, slew each other in wrath for the sake of Tilottama. Therefore, from affection I tell you, ye foremost ones of Bharata's line, that if you desire to do anything agreeable to me, make some such arrangements that you may not quarrel with one another for the sake of Draupadi." Vyasa continued, "The illustrious Pandavas, thus addressed by the great Rishi Narada, consulting with one another, established a rule amongst themselves in the presence of the celestial Rishi himself, endued with immeasurable energy. And the rule they made was that when one of them would be sitting with Draupadi, any of the other four who would see that one thus must retire into the forest for 12 years, passing his days as a Brahmacharan. After the virtuous Pandavas had established that rule amongst themselves, the great Muni Narada, gratified with them, went to the place he wished. Thus, O Janamejaya, did the Pandavas, urged by Narada, establish a rule amongst themselves in regard to their common wife. And it was for this, O Bharata, that no dispute ever arose between them." Arjuna Vanavesa Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 215. Vyasa said, "The Pandavas, having established such a rule, continued to reside there. By the prowess of their arms they brought many kings under their sway. And Krishna became obedient unto all the 5 sons of Pritha, those lions among men, of immeasurable energy. Like the river Sarasvati decked with elephants, which again take pleasure in that stream, Draupadi took great delight in her 5 heroic husbands, and they too took delight in her. And in consequence of the illustrious Pandavas being exceedingly virtuous in their practice, the whole race of Kurus, free from sin and happy, grew in prosperity. After some time, O king, it so happened that certain robbers lifted the cattle of a Brahmana, and while they were carrying away the booty, the Brahmana, deprived of his senses by anger, repaired to Kandavaprastha, and began to reprove the Pandavas in accents of woe. The Brahmana said, "Ye Pandavas, from this your dominion, my kind are even now being taken away by force by despicable and wicked wretches. Pursue ye the thieves. Alas, the sacrificial butter of a peaceful Brahmana is being taken away by crows. Alas, the wretched jackal invadeth the empty cave of a lion. A king that taketh the 6th part of the produce of the land without protecting the subject hath been called by the wise to be the most sinful person in the whole world. The wealth of a Brahmana is being taken away by robbers. Virtue itself is sustaining a diminution. Take me up by the hand, ye Pandavas, for I am plunged in grief." Vyasa continued, "Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, heard those accents of the Brahmana weeping in bitter grief. As soon as he heard those accents, he loudly assured the Brahmana, saying, 'No fear.' But it so happened that the chamber where the illustrious Pandavas had their weapons was then occupied by Yudhishthira the just with Krishna. Arjuna, therefore, was incapable of entering it or going alone with the Brahmana, though repeatedly urged to do either by the weeping accents of the Brahmana. Summoned by the Brahmana, Arjuna reflected, with a sorrowful heart, 'Alas, this innocent Brahmana's wealth is being robbed. I should certainly dry up his tears. He hath come to our gate, and is weeping even now. If I do not protect him, the king will be touched with sin in consequence of my indifference, our own irreligiousness will be cited throughout the kingdom, and we shall incur a great sin. If, disregarding the king, I enter the chamber, without doubt I shall be behaving untruthfully towards the monarch without a foe. By entering the chamber, again, I incur the penalty of an exile in the woods. But I must overlook everything. I care not if I have to incur sin by disregarding the king. I care not if I have to go to the woods and die there. Virtue is superior to the body and lasteth after the body hath perished." Dhananjaya, arriving at this resolution, entered the chamber and talked with Yudhishthira. Coming out with the bow, he cheerfully told the Brahmana, "Proceed, O Brahmana, with haste, so that those wretched robbers may not go much ahead of us." I shall accompany thee and restore unto thee thy wealth that hath fallen into the hands of the thieves. Then Dhananjaya, capable of using both his arms with equal skill, armed with the bow and cased in mail and riding in his war chariot decked with a standard, pursued the thieves, and piercing them with his arrows, compelled them to give up the booty. Benefiting the Brahmana thus by making over to him his kind, and winning great renown, the hero returned to the capital. Bowing unto all the elders, and congratulated by everybody, Partha at last approached Yudhishthira, and addressing him, said, Give me leave, O Lord, to observe the vow I took. In beholding thee sitting with Draupadi, I have violated the rule established by ourselves. I shall therefore go into the woods, for this is even our understanding. Then Yudhishthira, suddenly hearing those painful words, became afflicted with grief, and said in an agitated voice, Why? A little while after, King Yudhishthira in grief said unto his brother Dhananjaya of curly hair, who never departed from his vows, these words, O sinless one, if I am an authority worthy of regard, listen to what I say. O hero, full well do I know the reason why thou hadst entered my chamber and didst what thou regardest to be an act disagreeable to me. But there is no displeasure in my mind. The younger brother may, without fault, enter the chamber where the elder brother sitteth with his wife. It is only the elder brother that acts against the rules of propriety by entering the room where the younger brother sitteth with his wife. Therefore, O thou of mighty arms, desist from thy purpose. Do what I say. Thy virtue hath sustained no diminution. Thou hast not disregarded me. Arjuna, hearing this, replied, I have heard, even from thee, that quibbling is not permitted in the discharge of duty. I cannot waver from truth. Truth is my weapon. Vyasa continued, obtaining then the king's permission, Arjuna prepared himself for a forest life, and he went to the forest to live there for 12 years. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 216. Vyasa said, when that spreader of the renown of Kuru's race, the strong-armed Arjuna, set out for the forest, Brahmanas conversant with the Vedas walked behind that illustrious hero to a certain distance. Followed by Brahmanas conversant with the Vedas and their branches and devoted to the contemplation of the Supreme Spirit, by persons skilled in music, by ascetics devoted to the deity, by reciters of Puranas, by narrators of sacred stories, by devotees leading celibate lives, by vanaprasthas, by Brahmanas sweetly reciting celestial histories, and by various other classes of persons of sweet speeches, Arjuna journeyed like Indra followed by the Maruts. And, O thou of Bharata's race, that bull among the Bharatas saw, as he journeyed, many delightful and picturesque forests, lakes, rivers, seas, provinces, and waters. At length, on arriving at the source of the Ganges, the mighty hero thought of settling there. Listen now, O Janamejaya, to a wonderful feat which that foremost of the sons of Pandu, of high soul, did while living there. When that son of Kunti, O Bharata, and the Brahmanas who had followed him, took up their residence in that region, the latter performed innumerable agnihotras, sacrificial rites, by igniting the sacred fire. And, O king, in consequence of those learned vow-observing and illustrious Brahmanas, who never deviated from the right path, daily establishing and igniting with mantras on the banks of that sacred stream, after the performance of their ablutions, fires for their sacrifices, and pouring libations of clarified butter into the same, and worshipping those fires with offerings of flowers, that region itself where the Ganges entered the plains became exceedingly beautiful. One day that bull amongst the Pandavas, while residing in that region in the midst of those Brahmanas, descended, as usual, into the Ganges to perform his ablutions. After his ablutions had been over, and after he had offered oblations of water unto his deceased ancestors, he was about to get up from the stream to perform his sacrificial rites before the fire, when the mighty armed hero, O king, was dragged into the bottom of the water by Ulupi, the daughter of the king of the Nagas, urged by the god of desire. And it so happened that the son of Pandu was carried into the beautiful mansion of Kauravas, the king of the Nagas. Arjuna saw there a sacrificial fire ignited for himself. Beholding that fire, Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, performed his sacrificial rites with devotion. And Agni was much gratified with Arjuna for the fearlessness with which that hero had poured libations into his manifest form. After he had thus performed his rites before the fire, the son of Kunti, beholding the daughter of the king of the Nagas, addressed her smilingly and said, "O handsome girl, what an act of rashness hast thou done? O timid one! Whose is this beautiful region? Who art thou, and whose daughter?" Hearing these words of Arjuna, Ulupi answered, "There is a Naga of the name of Kauravya, born in the line of Airavata. I am, O prince, the daughter of that Kauravya, and my name is Ulupi. O tiger among men, beholding thee descend into the stream to perform thy ablutions, I was deprived of reason by the god of desire. O sinless one, I am still unmarried. Afflicted as I am by the god of desire on account of thee, O thou of Kuru's race, gratify me today by giving thyself up to me." Arjuna replied, "Commanded by King Yudhishthira, O amiable one, I am undergoing the vow of Brahmacharan for 12 years. I am not free to act in any way I like. But, O Ranger of the Waters, I am still willing to do thy pleasure, if I can. I have never spoken an untruth in my life. Tell me, therefore, O Naga maid, how I may act so that, while doing thy pleasure, I may not be guilty of any untruth or breach of duty." Ulupi answered, "I know, O son of Pandu, why thou wanderest over the earth, and why thou hast been commanded to lead the life of a Brahmacharan by the superior. Even this was the understanding to which all of you had been pledged, viz., that amongst you all owning Drupada's daughter as your common wife, he who would from ignorance enter the room where one of you would be sitting with her, should lead the life of a Brahmacharan in the woods for 12 years. The exile of any one amongst you, therefore, is only for the sake of Draupadi. Thou art but observing the duty arising from that vow. Thy virtue cannot sustain any diminution by acceding to my solicitation. Then again, O thou of large eyes, it is a duty to relieve the distressed. Thy virtue suffereth no diminution by relieving me. Oh, if, by this act, O Arjuna, thy virtue doth suffer a small diminution, thou wilt acquire great merit by saving my life. Know me for thy worshipper, O Partha. Therefore, yield thyself up to me. Even this, O Lord, is the opinion of the wise, viz., that one should accept a woman that with. If thou do not act in this way, know that I will destroy myself. O thou of mighty arms, earn great merit by saving my life. I seek thy shelter, O best of men. Thou protectest always, O son of Kunti, the afflicted and the masterless. I seek thy protection, weeping in sorrow. I woo thee, being filled with desire. Therefore, do what is agreeable to me. It behoveth thee to gratify my wish by yielding thyself up to me." Vyasa said, thus addressed by the daughter of the king of the Nagas, the son of Kunti did everything she desired, making virtue his motive. The mighty Arjuna, spending the night in the mansion of the Naga, rose with the sun in the morning. Accompanied by Ulupi, he came back from the palace of Kauravya to the region where the Ganges entereth the plains. The chaste Ulupi, taking her leave there, returned to her own abode. And, O Bharata, she granted unto Arjuna a boon making him invincible in water, saying, "Every amphibious creature shall, without doubt, be vanquishable by thee." Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 217. Vyasa said, Then the son of the wielder of the thunderbolt narrated everything unto those Brahmanas, residing with him there, set out for the breast of Himavat. Arriving at the spot called Agasthyavada, he next went to Vasishtha's peak. Thence the son of Kunti proceeded to the peak of Bhrigu. Purifying himself with ablutions and other rites there, that foremost of the Kurus gave away unto Brahmanas many thousands of cows and many houses. Thence that best of men proceeded to the sacred asylum called Hiranyavindu. Performing his ablutions there, that foremost of the sons of Pandu saw many holy regions. Descending from those heights, that chief of men, O Bharata, accompanied by the Brahmanas, journeyed towards the east, desiring to behold the regions that lay in that direction. That foremost one of Kuru's race saw many regions of sacred waters one after another. And beholding in the forest of Naimisha the delightful river Apalini, full of lotuses, and the Nanda and the Aparananda, the far-famed Kausaki, and the mighty rivers Gaya and Ganga, and all the regions of sacred water, he purified himself, O Bharata, with the usual rites, and gave away many cows unto Brahmanas. Whatever regions of sacred waters and whatever other holy palaces there were in Vanga and Kalinga, Arjuna visited all of them. Seeing them all and performing proper ceremonies, he gave away much wealth. Then, O Bharata, all those Brahmanas following the son of Pandu bade him farewell at the gate of the kingdom of Kalinga and desisted from proceeding with him any further. The brave Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, obtaining their leave, went towards the ocean, accompanied by only a few attendants. Crossing the country of the Kalingas, the mighty one proceeded, seeing on his way diverse countries and sacred spots and diverse delightful mansions and houses. Beholding the Mahendra mountain adorned with the ascetics residing there, he went to Manipura, proceeding slowly along the seashore. Beholding all the sacred waters and other holy places in that province, the strong-armed son of Pandu at last went, O king, to the virtuous Chitrangada, the ruler of Manipura. The king of Manipura had a daughter of great beauty named Chitrangada, and it so happened that Arjuna beheld her in her father's palace roving at pleasure. Beholding the handsome daughter of Chitrangada, Arjuna desired to possess her. Going unto the king, her father, he represented unto him what he sought. He said, Give away unto me thy daughter, O king. I am an illustrious Kshatriya's son. Hearing this, the king asked him, Whose son art thou? Arjuna replied, I am Dhananjaya, the son of Pandu and Kunti. The king, hearing this, spoke unto him these words in sweet accents. There was in our race a king of the name of Prabhanjana, who was childless. To obtain a child, he underwent severe ascetic penances. By his severe asceticism, O Partha, he gratified the god of gods, Mahadeva, the husband of Uma, that supreme lord holding the mighty bow called Pinaka. The illustrious lord granted him the boon that each successive descendant of his race should have one child only. In consequence of that boon, only one child is born unto every successive descendant of this race. All my ancestors, one after another, had each a male child. I, however, have only a daughter to perpetuate my race. But, O bull amongst men, I ever look upon this daughter of mine as my son. O bull of Bharata's race, I have duly made her a putrika. Therefore, one amongst the sons that may be begotten upon her by thee, O Bharata, shall be the perpetuator of my race. That son is the dower for which I may give away my daughter. O son of Pandu, if thou choosest, thou canst take her upon this understanding. Hearing these words of the king, Arjuna accepted them all, saying, So be it. Taking Chitrangada's daughter as his wife, the son of Kunti resided in that city for 3 years. When Chitrangada at last gave birth to a son, Arjuna embraced that handsome princess affectionately. And taking leave of the king, her father, he set out on his wanderings again. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 218. Vyasa said, Then that bull of Bharata's race went to the sacred waters on the banks of the southern ocean, all adorned with the ascetics residing there. And there lay scattered 5 such regions where also dwelt many ascetics. But those 5 waters themselves were shunned by all of them. Those sacred waters were called Agastya, and Subhadra, and Paloma of great holiness, and Karandama of great propitiousness, yielding the fruits of a horse sacrifice unto those that bathed there, and Bharadvaja, that great washer of sins. That foremost one among the Kurus, beholding those 5 sacred waters, and finding them uninhabited, and ascertaining also that they were shunned by the virtuous ascetics dwelling around, asked those pious men with joined hands, saying, Why, O ascetics, are these 5 sacred waters shunned by utterers of Brahma? Hearing him, the ascetics replied, There dwell in these waters 5 large crocodiles which take away the ascetics that may happen to bathe in them. It is for this, O son of Kuru's race, that these waters are shunned. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of the ascetics, that foremost of men endued with mighty arms, though dissuaded by them, went to behold those waters. Arrived at the excellent sacred water called Subhadra after a great rishi, the brave scorcher of all foes suddenly plunged into it to have a bath. As soon as that tiger among men had plunged into the water, a great crocodile, that was in it, seized him by the leg. But the strong-armed Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, that foremost of all men endued with might, seized that struggling ranger of the water and dragged it forcibly to the shore. But dragged by the renowned Arjuna to the land, that crocodile became transformed into a beautiful damsel bedecked with ornament. O king, that charming damsel of celestial form seemed to shine for her beauty and complexion. Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, beholding that strange sight, asked that damsel with a pleased heart, Who art thou, O beautiful one? Why hast thou been a ranger of the waters? Why also didst thou commit such a dreadful sin? The damsel replied, saying, I am, O mighty armed one, an Apsara that sported in the celestial woods. I am, O mighty one, Varga by name, and ever dear unto the celestial treasurer, Kuvera. I have 4 other companions, all handsome and capable of going everywhere at will. Accompanied by them I was one day going to the abode of Kuvera. On the way we beheld a Brahmana of rigid vows, and exceedingly handsome, studying the Vedas in solitude. The whole forest, in which he was sitting, seemed to be covered with his ascetic splendor. He seemed to have illuminated the whole region like the sun himself. Beholding his ascetic devotion of that nature and his wonderful beauty, we alighted in that region, in order to disturb his meditations. Myself and Sorabai and Samichi and Vadvuta and Lata approached that Brahmana, O Bharata, at the same time. We began to sing and smile and otherwise tempt that Brahmana. But, O hero, that Brahmana, youth, set not his heart even once upon us. His mind fixed on pure meditation, that youth of great energy suffered not his heart to waver, O bull among Kshatriyas, the glance he cast upon us was one of wrath. And he said, staring at us, becoming crocodiles, range ye the waters for 100 years. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 219. Vyasa said, Varga continued, We were then, O foremost one of Bharata's race, deeply distressed at this curse. We sought to propitiate that Brahmana of ascetic wealth that departed not from his vow. Addressing him, we said, inflated with a sense of our beauty and youth, and urged by the god of desire, we have acted very improperly. It behoveth thee, O Brahmana, to pardon us. Truly, O Brahmana, it was death to us that we had at all come hither to tempt thee of rigid vows and ascetic wealth. The virtuous, however, have said that women should never be slain. Therefore grow thou in virtue. It behoveth thee not to slay us so. O thou that art conversant with virtue, it hath been said that a Brahmana is ever the friend of every creature. O thou of great prosperity, let this speech of the wise become true. The eminent always protect those that seek protection at their hands. We seek thy protection. It behoveth thee to grant us pardon. Vyasa continued, thus addressed, that Brahmana of virtuous soul and good deeds and equal in splendor, O hero, unto the sun or the moon, became propitious unto them. And the Brahmana said, the words 100 and 100,000 are all indicative of eternity. The word 100, however, as employed by me is to be understood as a limited period and not indicative of a period without end. Ye shall, therefore, becoming crocodiles, seize and take away men, for only 100 years, as explained by me. At the end of that period, an exalted individual will drag you all from water to the land. Then ye will resume your real forms. Never have I spoken an untruth even in jest. Therefore, all that I have said must come to pass. And those sacred waters, within which I assign you your places, will, after you will have been delivered by that individual, become known all over the world by the name of Naritirthas, or sacred waters connected with the sufferings and the deliverance of females, and all of them shall become sacred and sin-cleansing in the eyes of the virtuous and the wise. Vyasa continued, Varga then addressing Arjuna, finished her discourse, saying, Hearing these words of the Brahmana, we saluted him with reverence and walked round him. Leaving that region we came away with heavy hearts, thinking as we proceeded, where shall we all soon meet with that man who will give us back our own shapes, after our transformation? As we were thinking of it, in almost a moment, O Bharata, we beheld even the eminent celestial Rishi Narada. Beholding that Rishi of immeasurable energy, our hearts were filled with joy. Saluting him with reverence, O Partha, we stood before him, with blushing faces. He asked of us the cause of our sorrow, and we told him all. Hearing what had happened, the Rishi said, In the lowlands bordering on the southern ocean, there are 5 regions of sacred water. They are delightful and eminently holy. Go ye thither without delay. That tiger among men, the Nanjaya, the son of Pandu of pure soul, will soon deliver you, without doubt, from this sad plight. O hero, hearing the Rishi's words, all of us came hither. O sinless one, true it is that I have today been delivered by thee. But those 4 friends of mine are still within the other waters here. O hero, do a good deed by delivering them also. Vyasa continued, Then, O monarch, that foremost of the Pandavas, endued with great prowess, cheerfully delivered all of them from that curse. Rising from the waters, they all regained their own forms. Those Apsaras then, O king, all looked as before. Freeing those sacred waters from the danger for which they had been notorious, and giving the Apsaras leave to go where they chose, Arjuna became desirous of once more beholding Chitrangada. He, therefore, proceeded towards the city of Manipura. Arrived there, he beheld on the throne the son he had begotten upon Chitrangada, and who was called by the name of Vabhruvahana. Seeing Chitrangada once more, Arjuna proceeded, O monarch, towards the spot called Gokarna. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 220. Vyasa said, Then Arjuna of immeasurable prowess saw, one after another, all the sacred waters and other holy places that were on the shores of the western ocean. Vibhatsa reached the sacred spot called Prabhasa. When the invisible Arjuna arrived at that sacred and delightful region, the slayer of Madhu, Krishna, heard of it. Madhava soon went there to see his friend, the son of Kunti. Krishna and Arjuna met together and embracing each other inquired after each other's welfare. Those dear friends, who were none else than the rishis Nara and Narayana of old, sat down. Vasudeva asked Arjuna about his travels, saying, Why, O Pandava, art thou wandering over the earth, beholding all the sacred waters and other holy places? Then Arjuna told him everything that had happened. Hearing everything, that mighty hero of Vrishni's race said, This is as it should be. And Krishna and Arjuna, having sported as they liked, for some time at Prabhasa, went to the Rivataka mountain to pass some days there. Before they arrived at Rivataka, that mountain had, at the command of Krishna, been well adorned by many artificers. Much food also had, at Krishna's command, been collected there. Enjoying everything that had been collected there for him, Arjuna sat with Vasudeva to see the performances of the actors and the dancers. Then the high-souled Pandava, dismissing them all with proper respect, laid himself down on a well-adorned and excellent bed. As the strong-armed one lay on that excellent bed, he described unto Krishna everything about the sacred waters, the lakes and the mountains, the rivers and the forests he had seen. While he was speaking of these, stretched upon that celestial bed, sleep, O Janamejaya, stole upon him. He rose in the morning, awakened, by sweet songs and melodious notes of the veena, guitar, and the panegyrics and benedictions of the bards. After he had gone through the necessary acts and ceremonies, he was affectionately accosted by him of the Vrishni race. Riding upon a golden car, the hero then set out for Dvarka, the capital of the Yadavas. And, O Janamejaya, for honoring the son of Kunti, the city of Dvarka was well adorned, even all the gardens and houses within it. The citizens of Dvarka, desirous of beholding the son of Kunti, began to pour eagerly into the public thoroughfares by hundreds of thousands. In the public squares and thoroughfares, hundreds and thousands of women, mixing with the men, swelled the great crowd of the Bhojas, the Vrishnis, and the Andhakas that had collected there. Arjuna was welcomed with respect by all the sons of Bhojas, the Vrishnis, and the Andhakas. And he, in his turn, worshipped those that deserved his worship, receiving their blessings. The hero was welcomed with affectionate reception by all the young men of the Yadava tribe. He repeatedly embraced all that were equal to him in age. Wending then to the delightful mansion of Krishna that was filled with gems and every article of enjoyment, he took up his abode there with Krishna for many days. Subhadraharana Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 221. Vyasa said, O best of monarchs, within a few days after this, there commenced on the Rivataka mountain a grand festival of the Vrishnis and the Andhakas. At the mountain festival of the Bhojas, the Vrishnis and the Andhakas, the heroes of those tribes began to give away much wealth unto Brahmanas by thousands. The region around that hill, O king, was adorned with many a mansion decked with gems and many an artificial tree of gaudy hue. The musicians struck up in concert, and the dancers began to dance, and the vocalists to sing. And the youth of the Vrishni race, endued with great energy, adorned with every ornament, and riding in their gold-decked cars, looked extremely handsome. The citizens, some on foot and some in excellent cars, with their wives and followers, were there by hundreds and thousands. And there was the Lord Haladhara, Valarama, roving at will, hilarious with drink, accompanied by his wife, Revti, and followed by many musicians and vocalists. There came Ugrasena also, the powerful king of Vrishni race, accompanied by his 1,000 wives, and followed by sweet singers. And Ragminia and Shamva also, ever furious in battle, roved there, excited with drink and adorned with floral wreaths of great beauty and with costly attires, and disported themselves like a pair of celestials. And Akrura and Sarana and Gada, and Vabhru, and Nisatha, and Charadeshna, and Prathu, Viprathu, and Satyaka, and Satyaki, and Bangakara, and Maharava, and Hardikya, and Adhava, and many others whose names are not given, accompanied by their wives that followed by bands of singers, adorned that mountain festival. When that delightful festival of immense grandeur commenced, Vasudeva and Partho went about, together, beholding everything around. While wandering there, they saw the handsome daughter of Vasudeva, Bhadra by name, decked with every ornament, in the midst of her maids. As soon as Arjuna beheld her, he was possessed by the god of desire. Then, O Bharata, that tiger among men, Krishna, observing Partha contemplate her with absorbed attention, said with a smile, "How is this? Can the heart of one that rangeth the woods be agitated by the god of desire? This is my sister, O Partha, and the uterine sister of Sarana. Blessed be thou, her name is Bhadra, and she is the favorite daughter of my father. Tell me if thy heart is fixed upon her, for I shall then speak to my father myself." Arjuna answered, "She is Vasudeva's daughter and Vasudeva's, Krishna, sister, endued with so much beauty, whom can she not fascinate? If this thy sister, this maid of the Vrishni race, becometh my wife, truly may I win prosperity in everything. Tell me, O Janardana, by what means I may obtain her. To get her I will achieve anything that is achievable by man." Vasudeva answered, "O bull amongst men, self-choice hath been ordained for the marriage of Kshatriyas. But that is doubtful, in its consequences, O Partha, as we do not know this girl's temper and disposition. In the case of Kshatriyas that are brave, a forcible abduction for purposes of marriage is applauded, as the learned have said. Therefore, O Arjuna, carry away this my beautiful sister by force, for who knows what she may do at a self-choice." Then Krishna and Arjuna, having thus settled as to what should be done, sent some speedy messengers unto Yudhishthira at Indraprastha, informing him of everything. The strong-armed Yudhishthira, as soon as he heard it, gave his assent to it. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 222. Vaisampayana said, Then Dhananjaya, informed of the assent of Yudhishthira, and ascertaining, O Janamejaya, that the maiden had gone to the Ravataka hill, obtained the assent of Vasudeva also, after having settled in consultation with him all that required to be done. Then that bull of Bharata's race, that foremost of men, with Krishna's assent, riding in his well-built car of gold equipped with rows of small bells, and with every kind of weapon, and the clatter of whose wheels resembled the roar of the clouds, and whose splendor was like unto that of a blazing fire, and which struck terror into the hearts of all foes, and unto which were yoked the steeds Saivya and Sugriva, himself accoutred in mail and armed with sword, and his fingers encased in leathern gloves, set out, as it were, on a hunting expedition. Meanwhile Subhadra, having paid her homage unto that prince of hills, Ravataka, and having worshipped the deities and made the Brahmanas utter benedictions upon her, and having also walked round the hill, was coming towards Dwaravati. The son of Kunti, afflicted with the shafts of the god of desire, suddenly rushed towards that Yadava girl of faultless features, and forcibly took her into his car. Having seized that girl of sweet smiles, that tiger among men proceeded in his car of gold towards his own city, Indraprastha. Meanwhile, the armed attendants of Subhadra, beholding her thus seized and taken away, all ran, crying towards the city of Dvarka. Reaching all together the Yadava court, called by the name of Siddharma, they represented everything about the prowess of Partha unto the chief officer of the court. The chief officer of the court, having heard everything from those messengers, blew his gold-decked trumpet of loud blare, calling all to arms. Stirred up by that sound, the Bhojas, the Vrishnis, and the Andhakas began to pour in from all sides. Those that were eating left their food, and those that were drinking left their drink. Those tigers among men, those great warriors of the Vrishni and the Andhaka tribes, took their seats upon their 1,000 thrones of gold covered with excellent carpets and variegated with gems and corals, and possessed of the luster of blazing fire. Indeed, they took their seats upon those thrones, like blazing fires receiving faggots to increase their splendor. And after they were seated in that court which was like unto a conclave of the celestials themselves, the chief officer of the court, assisted by those that stood at his back, spoke of the conduct of Jishnu. The proud Vrishni heroes, of eyes red with wine, as soon as they heard of it, rose up from their seats, unable to brook what Arjuna had done. Some amongst them said, "Yoke our cars," and some, "Bring our weapons," and some said, "Bring our costly bows and strong coats of mail," and some loudly called upon their charioteers to harness their cars, and some, from impatience, themselves yoked their horses decked with gold unto their cars. And while their cars and armors and standards were being brought, loud became the uproar of those heroes. Then Valadeva, white and tall as the peak of Kailasa, decked with garlands of wild flowers and attired in blue robes, and proud and intoxicated with drink, said these words: "Ye senseless men, what are ye doing, when Janardana sitteth silent? Without knowing what is in his mind, vainly do we roar in wrath. Let the high-souled Krishna give out what he proposeth. Accomplish promptly what he desireth to do." Then all of them, hearing those words of Halayuda that deserved to be accepted, exclaimed, "Excellent! Excellent!" They then all became silent. Silence having been restored by the words of the intelligent Valadeva, they took their seats once more in that assembly. Then Rama, that oppressor of foes, spoke unto Vasudeva, saying, "Why, O Janardana, sittest thou, gazing silently? O Achyuta, it was for thy sake that the son of Pritha had been welcomed and honored by us. It seemeth, however, that that vile wretch deserved not our homage. What man is there born of a respectable family that would break the plate after having dined from it? Even if one desireth to make such an alliance, yet remembering all the services he hath received, who is there, desirous of happiness, that acts so rashly? That Pandava disregarding us and thee too hath today outraged Subhadra, desiring to compass his own death. He hath placed his foot on the crown of my head. How shall I, O Govinda, tamely bear it? Shall I not resent it, even like a snake that is trodden upon? Alone shall I today make the earth destitute of Kauravas. Never shall I put up with this transgression by Arjuna." Then all the Bhojas, Vrishnis, and Andhakas, present there, approved of everything that Valadeva had said, deeply roaring like unto a kettle drum o'er the clouds. Harana Harana Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 223. Vyasa said, when the heroes of the Vrishni race began to speak repeatedly in this strain, Vasudeva uttered these words pregnant with deep import and consistent with true morality. Gudakiza, the conqueror of sleep or he of the curly hair, by what he hath done, hath not insulted our family. He hath without doubt rather enhanced our respect. Partha knoweth that we of the Satwata race are never mercenary. The son of Pandu also regardeth a self-choice as doubtful in its results. Who also would approve of accepting a bride and gift as if she were an animal? What man again is there on earth that would sell his offspring? I think Arjuna, seeing these faults and all the other methods, took the maiden away by force, according to the ordinance. This alliance is very proper. Subhadra is a renowned girl. Partha too possesseth renown. Perhaps, thinking of all this, Arjuna hath taken her away by force. Who is there that would not desire to have Arjuna for a friend, who is born in the race of Bharata and the renowned Santanu, and the son also of the daughter of Kuntabhoja? I do not see, in all the worlds with Indra and the Rudras, the person that can by force vanquish Partha in battle, except the three-eyed god Mahadeva. His car is well known. Yoked thereunto are those steeds of mine. Partha as a warrior is well known, and his lightness of hand is well known. Who shall be equal to him? Even this is my opinion. Go ye cheerfully after the Nanjaya, and by conciliation stop him and bring him back. If Partha goes to his city after having vanquished us by force, our fame will be gone. There is no disgrace, however, in conciliation. Hearing, O monarch, those words of Vasudeva, they did as he directed. Stopped by them, Arjuna returned to Dvarka and was united in marriage with Subhadra. Worshipped by the sons of Vrishni's race, Arjuna, sporting there as he pleased, passed a whole year in Dvarka. The last year of his exile the Exalted One passed at the sacred region of Pushkara. After the 12 years were complete he came back to Kandavaprastha. He approached the king first and then worshipped the Brahmanas with respectful attention. At last the hero went unto Draupadi. Draupadi, from jealousy, spoke unto him, saying, Why tarriest thou here, O son of Kunti? Go where the daughter of the Satwata race is. A second tie always relaxeth the first one upon a faggot. And Krishna lamented much in this strain. But Dhananjaya pacified her repeatedly and asked for her forgiveness. And returning soon unto where Subhadra, attired in red silk, was staying, Arjuna sent her into the inner apartments dressed not as a queen but in the simple garb of a cowherd woman. But arrived at the palace, the renowned Subhadra looked handsomer in that dress. The celebrated Bhadra of large and slightly red eyes first worshipped Pritha. Kunti from excess of affection smelt the head of that girl of perfectly faultless features and pronounced infinite blessing upon her. Then that girl of face like the full moon hastily went unto Draupadi and worshipped her, saying, I am thy maid. Krishna rose hastily and embraced the sister of Madhava from affection, and said, Let thy husband be without a foe. Bhadra then, with a delighted heart, said unto Draupadi, So be it. From that time, O Janamejaya, those great warriors, the Pandavas, began to live happily, and Kunti also became very happy. Vyasa continued, when that scorcher of foes, viz., Kesva of pure soul and eyes, like lotus petals, heard that the foremost of the Pandavas, viz., Arjuna, had reached his own excellent city of Indraprastha, he came thither accompanied by Rama and the other heroes and great warriors of the Vrishni and the Andhaka tribes, and by his brothers and sons and many other brave warriors. And Soren came accompanied by a large army that protected him. And there came with Soren, that oppressor of foes, viz., the exceedingly liberal Akrura of great intelligence and renown, the generalissimo of the brave Vrishni host. And there also came Anadrishti of great prowess, and Adhava of great renown, of great intelligence, of great soul, and a disciple of Vrahaspati himself. And there also came Satyaka and Salayaka and Kritavarman and Satwata, and Pradyumna and Samva and Nisatha and Sanku, and Sharadeshna, and Jili of great prowess, and Viprathu also and Sarana of mighty arms and Gada, the foremost of learned men. These and many other Vrishnis and Bhojas and Andhakas came to Indraprastha, bringing with them many nuptial presents. King Yudhishthira, hearing that Madhava had arrived, sent the twins out to receive him. Received by them, the Vrishni host of great prosperity entered Kandavaprastha well adorned with flags and ensigns. The streets were well swept and watered and decked with floral wreaths and bunches. These were, again, sprinkled over with sandalwood water that was fragrant and cooling. Every part of the town was filled with the sweet scent of burning aloes. And the city was full of joyous and healthy people and adorned with merchants and traders. That best of men, viz., Kesva of mighty arms, accompanied by Rama and many of the Vrishnis, Andhakas and Bhojas, having entered the town, was worshipped by the citizens and Brahmanas by thousands. At last Kesva entered the palace of the king, which was like unto the mansion of Indra himself. Beholding Rama, Yudhishthira received him with due ceremonies. The king smelt the head of Kesva and embraced him. Govinda, gratified with the reception, humbly worshipped Yudhishthira. He also paid homage unto Bhima, that tiger among men. Yudhishthira the son of Kunti then received the other principal men of the Vrishni and the Andhaka tribes with due ceremonies. Yudhishthira reverentially worshipped some as his superiors and welcomed others as equals. And some he received with affection, and by some he was worshipped with reverence. Then Hrishikesa of great renown gave unto the party of the bridegroom much wealth. And unto Subhadra he gave the nuptial presents that had been given to her by her relatives. Krishna gave unto the Pandavas 1,000 cars of gold furnished with rows of bells, and unto each of which were put 4 steeds driven by well-trained charioteers. He also gave unto them 10,000 cows belonging to the country of Mathura, and yielding much milk and all of excellent color. Well pleased, Janardana also gave them 1,000 Marias with gold harnesses and of color white as the beams of the moon. He also gave them 1,000 mules, all well-trained and possessing the speed of the wind, of white color with black manes. And he of eyes like lotus petals also gave unto them 1,000 damsels well-skilled in assisting at bathing and at drinking, young in years and virgins all before their first season, well-attired and of excellent complexion, each wearing 100 pieces of gold around her neck, of skins perfectly polished, decked with every ornament, and well-skilled in every kind of personal service. Janardana also gave unto them hundreds of thousands of draft horses from the country of the Valhikas as Subhadra's excellent dower. That foremost one of Dasara's race also gave unto Subhadra as her peculium 10 carrier loads of first-class gold possessing the splendor of fire, some purified and some in a state of ore. And Rama, having the plough for his weapon and always loving bravery, gave unto Arjuna, as a nuptial present, 1,000 elephants with secretions flowing in 3 streams from the 3 parts of their bodies, the temple, the ears, and the anus, each large as a mountain summit, irresistible in battle, decked with coverlets and bells, well adorned with other golden ornaments, and equipped with excellent thrones on their backs. And that large wave of wealth and gems that the Yadavas presented, together with the cloths and blankets that represented its foam, and the elephants its alligators and sharks, and the flags its floating weeds swelling into large proportions, mingled with the Pandu ocean and filled it to the brim, to the great sorrow of all foes. Yudhishthira accepted all those presents and worshipped all those great warriors of the Vrishni and the Andhaka races. Those illustrious heroes of the Kuru, the Vrishni, and the Andhaka races passed their days in pleasure and merriment there like virtuous men, after death, in the celestial regions. The Kurus and the Vrishnis with joyous hearts amused themselves there, setting up at times loud shouts mingled with clappings of the hand. Spending many days in sports and merriment there, and worshipped by the Kurus all the while, the Vrishni heroes endued with great energy then returned to the city of Dwaravati. And the great warriors of the Vrishni and the Andhaka races set out with Rama in the van, carrying with them those gems of the purest rays that had been given them by those foremost ones of Kuru's race. And, O Bharata, the high-souled Vasudeva remained there with Arjuna in the delightful city of Indraprastha. And the illustrious one wandered over the banks of the Yamuna in search of deer. And he sported with Arjuna, piercing with his shafts deer and wild boars. Then Subhadra, the favorite sister of Kesava, gave birth to an illustrious son, like Puloma's daughter, the queen of heaven, bringing forth Janta. And the son that Subhadra brought forth was of long arms, broad chest, and eyes as large as those of a bull. That hero and oppressor of foes came to be called Abhimanyu. And the son of Arjuna, that grinder of foes and bull among men, was called Abhimanyu because he was fearless and wrathful. And that great warrior was begotten upon the daughter of the Satwata race by the Nanjaya, like fire produced in a sacrifice from within the Sami wood by the process of rubbing. Upon the birth of this child, Yudhishthira, the powerful son of Kunti, gave away unto Brahmanas 10,000 cows and coins of gold. The child from his earliest years became the favorite of Vasudeva and of his father and uncles, like the moon of all the people of the world. Upon his birth, Krishna performed the usual rites of infancy. The child began to grow up like the moon of the bright fortnight. That grinder of foes soon became conversant with the Vedas and acquired from his father the science of weapon both celestial and human, consisting of 4 branches and 10 divisions. Endued with great strength, the child also acquired the knowledge of counteracting the weapons hurled at him by others, and great lightness of hand and fleetness of motion forward and backward and transverse and wheeling. Abhimanyu became like unto his father in knowledge of the scriptures and rites of religion. And Dhananjaya, beholding his son, became filled with joy. Like Maghavat beholding Arjuna, the latter beheld his son Abhimanyu and became exceedingly happy. Abhimanyu possessed the power of slaying every foe and bore on his person every auspicious mark. He was invisible in battle and broad-shouldered as the bull. Possessing a broad face as the hood of the snake, he was proud like the lion. Wielding a large bow, his prowess was like that of an elephant in rut. Possessed of a face handsome as the full moon, and of a voice deep as the sound of the drum or the clouds, he was equal unto Krishna in bravery and energy, in beauty and in features. The auspicious Panchali also, from her 5 husbands, obtained 5 sons, all of whom were heroes of the foremost rank and immovable in battle like the hills. Pratavindya by Yudhishthira, Sudasoma by Vrkodara, Shrutakarman by Arjuna, Satanaka by Nakula, and Shrudasena by Sadeva, these were the 5 heroes and great warriors that Panchali brought forth, like Aditi bringing forth the Adityas. And the Brahmanas, from their foreknowledge, said unto Yudhishthira that as the son of his would be capable of bearing like the Vindhya mountains the weapons of the foe, he should be called Pratavindya. And because the child that Draupadi bore to Bhimasena was born after Bhima had performed 1,000 Soma sacrifices, he came to be called Sudasoma. And because Arjuna's son was born upon his return from exile, during which he had achieved many celebrated feats, that child came to be called Shrutakarman. While Nakula named his son Satanaka after a royal sage of that name, in the illustrious race of Kuru. Again, the son that Draupadi bore to Sadeva was born under the constellation called Vanidavata, Kritika, therefore was he called after the generalissimo of the celestial host, Shrudasena, Kartikeya. The sons of Draupadi were born, each at the interval of 1 year, and all of them became renowned and much attached to one another. And, O monarch, all their rites of infancy and childhood, such as Chudakarana and Upanayana, first shave of the head and investiture with the sacred threads, were performed by Daumya according to the ordinance. All of them, of excellent behavior and vows, after having studied the Vedas, acquired from Arjuna a knowledge of all the weapons, celestial and human. And, O tiger among kings, the Pandavas, having obtained sons all of whom were equal unto the children of the celestials, and endued with broad chests, and all of whom became great warriors, were filled with joy. Kandavadaha Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 224. Vyasa said, the Pandavas, after they had taken up their abode at Indraprastha at the command of Dhritarashtra and Bhishma, began to bring other kings under their sway. All the subjects of the kingdom lived most happily depending upon Yudhishthira the just, like a soul living happily depending upon a body blessed with auspicious marks and pious deeds. And, O bull in Bharata's race, Yudhishthira paid homage unto virtue, pleasure, and profit, and judicious proportion, as if each were a friend dear unto him as his own self. It seemed as if the 3 pursuits virtue, pleasure, and profit became personified on earth, and amongst them the king shone as a 4th. The subjects, having obtained Yudhishthira as their king, obtained in their monarch one that was devoted to the study of the Vedas, one that was performer of the great sacrifices, and one that was protector of all good people. In consequence of Yudhishthira's influence, the good fortune of all the monarchs of the earth became stationary, and their hearts became devoted to the meditation of the Supreme Spirit, and virtue itself began to grow every way all round. And in the midst of and assisted by his 4 brothers, the king looked more resplendent than he would have done if he were alone, like a great sacrifice depending upon and assisted by the 4 Vedas. Many learned Brahmanas with Dhananjaya at their head, each like unto Vrihaspati, waited upon the monarch, like the celestials waiting upon the Lord of the creation. From excess of affection, the eyes and hearts of all the people equally took great delight in Yudhishthira, who was even as the full moon without a stain. The people took delight in him not only because he was their king, but also from sincere affection. The king always did what was agreeable to them. The sweet-speeched Yudhishthira of great intelligence never uttered anything that was improper or untrue or unbearable or disagreeable. The best of monarchs of the Bharata race, endued with great energy, passed his days happily for the welfare of all as his own. His brothers, also bringing by their energy other kings under their sway, passed their days in happiness, without a foe to disturb their peace. After a few days, Vibhatsu, addressing Krishna, said, "The summer days have set in, O Krishna. Therefore, let us go to the banks of the Yamuna. O slayer of Madhu, sporting there in the company of friends, we will, O Janardana, return in the evening." Thereupon Vasudeva said, O son of Kunti, this is also my wish. Let us, O Partha, sport in the waters as we please, in the company of friends. Vaisampayana continued, Then, O Bharata, having consulted thus with each other, Partha and Govinda, with Yudhishthira's leave, set out, surrounded by friends. Reaching a fine spot, on the banks of the Yamuna, suitable for purposes of pleasure, overgrown with numerous tall trees and covered with several high mansions that made the place look like the celestial city, and within which had been collected for Krishna and Partha numerous costly and well-flavored viands and drinks and other articles of enjoyment and floral wreaths and various perfumes, the party entered without delay the inner apartments adorned with many precious gems of pure rays. Entering those apartments, everybody, O Bharata, began to sport, according to his pleasure. The women of the party, all of full rotund hips and deep bosoms and handsome eyes, and gait unsteady with wine, began to sport there at the command of Krishna and Partha. Some amongst the women sported as they liked in the woods, some in the waters, and some within the mansions, as directed by Partha and Govinda. Draupadi and Subhadra, exhilarated with wine, began to give away unto the women so sporting their costly robes and ornaments. And some amongst those women began to dance in joy, and some began to sing, and some amongst them began to laugh and jest, and some to drink excellent wines. Some began to obstruct one another's progress, and some to fight with one another, and to discourse with one another in private. Those mansions and the woods, filled with the charming music of flutes and guitars and kettledrums, became the scene of prosperity personified. When such was the state of things there, Arjuna and Vasudeva went to a certain charming spot, in those woods, not far from the place where the others were. O monarch, the high-souled Krishna, and that subjugators of hostile cities, viz., Arjuna, going thither, sat down upon two very costly seats. Vasudeva and Partha amused themselves there with discoursing upon many past achievements of prowess and other topics. Unto Vasudeva and Dhananjaya, happily sitting there like the Ashwins in heaven, a certain Brahmana came. The Brahmana that came there looked like a tall sala tree. His complexion was like unto molten gold, his beard was bright yellow tinged with green, and the height and the thickness of the body were in just proportion. Of matted locks and dressed in rags, he resembled the morning sun in splendor. Of eyes like lotus petals and of a tawny hue, he seemed to be blazing with effulgence. Beholding that foremost of Brahmanas blazing with splendor approach towards them, both Arjuna and Vasudeva, hastily rising from their seats, stood, waiting for his commands. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 225. Vaisampayana said, Then that Brahmana addressed Arjuna and Vasudeva of the Satwata race, saying, Ye who are now staying so near unto Pandava are the two foremost of heroes on earth. I am a voracious Brahmana that always eateth much. O thou of the Vrishni race, and O Partha, I solicit you to gratify me by giving me sufficient food. Thus addressed by the Brahmana, Krishna and the son of Pandu answered him, saying, Oh, tell us what kind of food will gratify thee so that we may endeavor to give it thee. The illustrious Brahmana, thus replied to, said unto those heroes who were inquiring after the kind of food he sought, I do not desire to eat ordinary food. Know that I am Agni. Give me that food which suiteth me. This forest of Pandava is always protected by Indra. And as it is protected by the illustrious one, I always fail to consume it. In that forest dwelleth, with his followers and family, a Naga, called Takshaka, who is the friend of Indra. It is for him that the wielder of the thunderbolt protecteth this forest. Many other creatures also are thus protected here for the sake of Takshaka. Desiring to consume the forest, I succeed not in my attempts in consequence of Indra's prowess. Beholding me blazing forth, he always poureth upon me water from the clouds. Therefore, I succeed not in consuming the forest of Pandava, although I desire very much to do so. I have now come to you who are both skilled in weapons. If you help me, I will surely consume this forest, for even this is the food that is desired by me. As ye are conversant with excellent weapons, I pray you to prevent those showers from descending and any of the creatures from escaping, when I begin to consume this forest. Janamejaya said, Why did the illustrious Agni desire to consume the forest of Pandava that was filled with various living creatures and protected by the chief of the celestials? When Agni consumed in wrath the forest of Kandava, it is evident there was a grave cause. I desire, O Brahmana, to hear all this in detail from thee. Tell me, O sage, how the Kandava forest was consumed in days of yore. Vyasa said, O chief of men, I will narrate to you the story of the conflagration of Kandava as told by rishis in the Purana. It hath been heard, O king, in the Purana that there was a celebrated king of the name of Swataki who was endued with strength and prowess and who was equal unto Indra himself. No one on earth has equaled him in sacrifices, charity, and intelligence. Swataki performed the 5 great sacrifices and many others, at all of which the presents unto Brahmanas were large. The heart of that monarch, O king, was always set upon sacrifices, religious rites, and gifts of all kinds. And King Swataki of great intelligence, assisted by his Ritwiks, performed sacrifices for many long years, till those sacrificial priests, with eyes afflicted by the continued smoke and becoming very weak, left that monarch, wishing nevermore to assist at his sacrifices. The king, however, repeatedly asked those Ritwiks to come to him. But they came not to his sacrifice in consequence of the painful state of their eyes. The king, therefore, invited at the command of his own Ritwiks others like unto them, and completed the sacrifice that he had begun. After some days had elapsed, King Swataki desired to perform another sacrifice which should extend for 100 years. But the illustrious monarch obtained not any priest to assist him in it. The celebrated king then, with his friends and relatives, casting off all sloth, repeatedly courted his priests with great persistence, by bowing down unto them, by conciliatory speeches, and by gifts of wealth. All of them, however, refused to accomplish the purpose which that king of immeasurable energy had in view. Then that royal sage, getting angry, addressed those Brahmanas sitting in their asylums, and said, If, ye Brahmanas, I were a fallen person, or, if I were wanting in homage and service to you, I should then deserve to be abandoned without scruple by you and by other Brahmanas at the same time. But as I am neither degraded nor wanting in homage to you, it behoveth you not to obstruct the performance by me of my sacrifice, or to abandon me thus, ye foremost of Brahmanas, without adequate reason. I seek, ye Brahmanas, your protection. It behoveth you to be propitious unto me. But, ye foremost of Brahmanas, if you abandon me from enmity alone or any improper motive, I shall go unto other priests for their assistance in this sacrifice of mine, and conciliating them by sweet words and gifts, I shall represent unto them the business I have on hand, so that they may accomplish it. Having said this, the monarch became silent. And, O chastiser of foes, when those priests well knew that they could not assist at the king's sacrifice, they pretended to be angry, and addressing that best of monarchs said, O best of kings, thy sacrifices are incessant. By assisting thee always, we have all been fatigued. And as we have been wearied in consequence of these labors, it behoveth thee to give us leave. O sinless one, from loss of judgment thou canst not wait, but urgest us repeatedly. Go unto Rudra. He will assist at thy sacrifice. Hearing those words of censure and wrath, King Swataki became angry. And the monarch, wending to the mountains of Kailasa, devoted himself to asceticism there. And, O king, the monarch began to worship Mahadeva with fixed attention, and by observing the most rigid vows. And foregoing all food at times, he passed a long period. The monarch ate only fruits and roots, sometimes at the 12th and sometimes at the 16th hour of the whole day. King Swataki stood for 6 months, wrapped in attention, with arms upraised and steadfast eyes, like the trunk of a tree or a column rooted to the ground. And, O Bharata, Sankara, at last gratified with that tiger among kings, who was undergoing such hard penances, showed himself unto him. And the god spake unto the monarch in a calm and grave voice, saying, O tiger among kings, O chastiser of foes, I have been gratified with thee for thy asceticism. Blessed be thou. Ask now the boon that thou, O king, desirest. Hearing these words of Rudra of immeasurable energy, the royal sage bowed unto that deity and replied, saying, O illustrious one, O thou that art worshipped by the 3 worlds, if thou hast been gratified with me, then, O God of gods, assist me thyself, O Lord of the celestials, in my sacrifice. Hearing these words spoken by the monarch, the illustrious god was gratified, and smilingly said, "We do not ourselves assist at sacrifices, but as thou, O king, hast undergone severe penances, desirous of obtaining a boon, I will, O chastiser of foes, assist at thy sacrifice, upon, O king, this condition." And Rudra continued, "If, O king of kings, thou canst, for 12 years, pour without intermission libations of clarified butter into the fire, thyself leading all the while the life of a Brahmacharan with rapt attention, then thou shalt obtain from me what thou askest." King Swataki, thus addressed by Rudra, did all that he was directed to do by the wielder of the trident. And after 12 years had elapsed, he again came unto Mahesvara. And Sankara, the creator of the worlds, upon seeing Swataki, that excellent monarch, immediately said, "In great gratification, I have been gratified by thee, O best of kings, with this thy own act. But, O chastiser of foes, the duty of assisting at sacrifices properly belongeth to Brahmanas. Therefore, O oppressor of foes, I will not myself assist at thy sacrifice today. There is on earth an exalted Brahmana who is even a portion of my own self. He is known by the name of Durvasa. Even that Brahmana endued with great energy will assist you in thy sacrifice. Let, therefore, every preparation be made." Hearing these words uttered by Rudra, the king, returning to his own capital, began to collect all that was necessary. After everything had been collected, the monarch again presented himself before Rudra and said, "Every necessary article hath been collected, and all my preparations are complete, through thy grace, O God of gods. Let me, therefore, be installed at the sacrifice tomorrow." Having heard these words of that illustrious king, Rudra summoned Durvasa before him and said, "This, O Durvasa, is that best of monarchs called Swataki. At my command, O best of Brahmanas, assist even this king in his sacrifice." And the rishi Durvasa said unto Rudra, "So be it." Then the sacrifice for which King Swataki had made those preparations took place. And the illustrious monarch's sacrifice was performed according to the ordinance and in proper season. And the gifts, on that occasion, unto the Brahmanas were large. And after that monarch's sacrifice had come to an end, all the other priests who had come to assist at it went away with Durvasa's leave. All other Sadasyas, also of immeasurable energy, who had been installed at that sacrifice, then went away. That exalted monarch then entered his own palace, worshipped by exalted Brahmanas conversant with the Vedas, eulogized by chanters of panegyrical hymns, and congratulated by the citizens. Such was the history of that best of monarchs, the royal sage Swataki, who, when the time came, ascended to heaven, having won great renown on earth, and accompanied by the Ritwiks and the Sadasyas that had helped him in life. Vyasa continued, "At that sacrifice of Swataki, Agni had drunk clarified butter for 12 years. Indeed, clarified butter had been poured into Agni's mouth in a continuous stream for that period. Having drunk so much butter, Agni, satiated, desired not to drink butter again from the hand of anybody else at any other sacrifice. Agni became pale, having lost his color, and he could not shine as before. He felt a loss of appetite from surfeit, and his energy itself decreased, and sickness afflicted him. Then when the drinker of sacrificial libations perceived that his energy was gradually diminishing, he went to the sacred abode of Brahman that is worshipped by all. Approaching the great deity seated on his seat, Agni said, "O exalted one, Swataki hath, by his sacrifice, gratified me to excess. Even now I am suffering from surfeit which I cannot dispel. O Lord of the universe, I am being reduced both in splendor and strength. I desire to regain, through thy grace, my own permanent nature." Hearing these words from Hudavaha, the illustrious creator of all things smilingly replied unto him, saying, "O exalted one, thou hast eaten, for 12 years, a continuous stream of sacrificial butter poured into thy mouth. It is for this that illness hath seized thee. But, O Agni, grieve not for it. Thou shalt soon regain thy own nature. I shall dispel this surfeit of thine, and the time for it is even come. The dreadful forest Kandava, that abode of the enemies of the gods, which thou hadst of old once consumed to ashes at the request of the gods, hath now become the home of numerous creatures. When thou wilt have eaten the fat of those creatures, thou shalt regain thy own nature. Proceed thither in haste to consume that forest with its living population. Thou wilt then be cured of thy malady." Hearing the words that fell from the lips of the supreme deity, Duryodhana proceeded with great speed and soon reached the forest of Pandava in great vigor. Arrived there, he suddenly blazed forth in anger, assisted by Vyasa. Beholding Pandava on fire, the dwellers in the forest that were there made great efforts to extinguish the conflagration. Elephants by hundreds of thousands, speeding in anger, brought water in their trunks and scattered it upon the fire. Thousands of many-hooded snakes, mad with anger, hastily began to scatter upon fire much water from those many hoods of theirs. And so, O bull of Bharata's race, the other creatures dwelling in that forest, by various appliances and efforts, soon extinguished the fire. In this way, Agni blazed forth in Pandava repeatedly, even for 7 times. And it was in this way that the blazing fire was extinguished there as often by the denizens of that forest. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 226. Vyasa said, "Then Vabhruvahana, Agni, in anger and disappointment, with his ailment uncured, went back to the grandsire. And he represented unto Brahman all that had happened. The illustrious deity, reflecting for a moment, said unto him, O sinless one, I see a way by which thou mayest consume the forest of Pandava today in the very sight of Indra. Those old deities, Nara and Narayana, have become incarnate in the world of men to accomplish the business of the celestials. They are called on earth Arjuna and Vasudeva. They are even now staying in the forest of Pandava. Solicit them for aiding thee in consuming that forest. Thou shalt then consume the forest even if it be protected by the celestials. They will certainly prevent the population of Pandava from escaping, and thwart Indra also, and aiding anyone in the escape. I have no doubt of this." Hearing these words, Agni came in haste unto Krishna and Partha. "O king, I have already told thee what he said, having approached the illustrious pair." O tiger among kings, hearing those words of Agni, who was desirous of consuming the forest of Pandava against the will of Indra, Vibhatsa said unto him these words well suited to the occasion, "I have numberless excellent celestial weapons with which I can fight even many wielders of the thunderbolt. But, O exalted one, I have no bow suited to the strength of my arms, and capable of bearing the might I may put forth in battle. In consequence of the lightness of my hands, also I require arrows that must never be exhausted. My car also is scarcely able to bear load of arrows that I would desire to keep by me. I desire celestial steeds of pure white, possessing the speed of the wind, and a car possessing the splendor of the sun and the clatter of whose wheels should resemble the roar of the clouds. Then, there is no weapon suited to Krishna's energy and with which Madhava can slay Nagas and Pisachas. O exalted one, it behoveth thee to give us the means by which success may be achieved and by which we may thwart Indra in pouring his showers upon that extensive forest. O Pavaka, we are ready to do all that manliness and prowess can do. But, O exalted one, it behoveth thee to give us the adequate means." Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 227. Vyasa said, thus addressed by Arjuna, the smoke-banded Duryodhana, desirous of an interview with Varuna, recollected that son of Aditi, that deity protecting one of the points of the heavens and having his home in the water and ruling that element. Varuna, knowing that he was thought of by Pavaka, immediately appeared before that deity. The smoke-banded celestial, welcoming with reverence the ruler of the waters, that fourth of the Lokapalas, said unto that eternal god of gods, Give me without loss of time that bow and quiver, and that 8-banded car also, which were obtained from King Soma. Partha will achieve a great task with Gandiva, and Vasudeva also with the discus. Give both, therefore, unto me today. Hearing these words, Varuna replied unto Pavaka, saying, Well, I am giving them. He then gave that wonderful jewel of a bow that was endued with great energy. That bow was the enhancer of fame and achievements, and was incapable of being injured by any weapon. It was the chief of all weapons, and the grinder of them all. And it was the smiter of hostile armies, and was alone equal to 100,000 bows. It was the multiplier of kingdoms, and was variegated with excellent colors. It was well adorned, and beautiful to behold, and without a mark of weakness or injury anywhere. And it was always worshipped both by the celestials and the Gandharvas. Varuna also gave 2 inexhaustible quivers, and he also gave a car furnished with celestial weapons, and whose banner bore a large ape. Yoked unto that car were steeds white as silver of the fleecy clouds, and born in the region of the Gandharvas, and decked with golden harness, and resembling in fleetness the wind or the mind. And it was equipped with implement of war, and was incapable of being vanquished by the celestials or the asuras. Its splendor was great, and the sounds of its wheels was tremendous. It delighted the heart of every creature that looked at it. It had been made by Viswakarman, the architect of the universe and one of the lords of creation, after severe ascetic meditation. Its splendor, like that of the sun, was so great that no one could gaze at it. It was the very car from which the Lord Soma had vanquished the Dandavas. Resplendent with beauty, it looked like an evening cloud reflecting the effulgence of the setting sun. It was furnished with an excellent flagstaff of golden color and great beauty. And there sat upon that flagstaff a celestial ape of form fierce like that of a lion or a tiger. Stationed on high, the ape seemed bent upon burning everything it beheld. And upon the other flags were various creatures of large size, whose roars and yells caused the enemy's soldiers to faint. Then Arjuna, accoutred in mail and armed with the sword, and his fingers cased in leathern gloves, walking round that excellent car adorned with numerous flags, and bowing unto the gods, ascended it like a virtuous man riding in the celestial car that bears him to heaven. And taking up that celestial and first of bows created by Brahman of old, and called Gandiva, Arjuna was filled with joy. And bowing unto Hudasana, Partha, endued with great energy, took up the bow and strung it forcibly. Those who heard the noise that was made while the mighty Pandava strung that bow, quaked with fear. And having obtained that car and that bow, and the 2 inexhaustible quivers, the son of Kunti became glad and thought himself competent to assist at the task. And Pavaka then gave unto Krishna a discus with an iron pole attached to a hole in the center. And it was a fiery weapon and became his favorite. Having obtained that weapon, Krishna also became equal to the task. Pavaka then, addressing Krishna, said, "With this, O slayer of Madhu, thou shalt be able without doubt to vanquish in battle even foes that are not human. With this weapon, without doubt, thou shalt be superior in battle to men and gods, and Rakshasas and Pisachas, and Daityas and Nagas. And thou shalt certainly be able with this to smite all. And, O Madhava, hurled by thee in battle at thy foes, this weapon will irresistibly slay the enemy and again come back into thy hands." And the Lord Varuna, after this, gave unto Krishna a mace, of name Kamadaki, capable of slaying every Daitya and producing, when hurled, a roar like that of the thunder. Then Arjuna and Achyuta, filled with joy, said unto Pavaka, "O exalted one, furnished with weapons and knowing their use, possessed of cars with flags and flagstaffs, we are now able to fight with even all the celestials and the asuras, together, let alone the wielder of the thunderbolt desirous of fighting for the sake of the Naga, his friend Takshaka." Arjuna also said, "O Pavaka, while Hrishikesa, endued with abundant energy, moves on the field of battle with this discus in hand, there is nothing in the 3 worlds that he will not be able to consume by hurling this weapon. Having obtained the bow Gandiva and this couple of inexhaustible quivers, I also am ready to conquer in battle the 3 worlds. Therefore, O Lord, blaze thou forth as thou likest, surrounding this large forest on every side. We are quite able to help thee." Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed both by Dasara and Arjuna, the illustrious god then put forth his most energetic form, and prepared to consume the forest. Surrounding it on all sides with his 7 flames, he began to consume the forest of Kandava, exhibiting his all-consuming form like that at the end of the Yuga cycle. And, O bull of Bharata's race, surrounding that forest and catching it from all sides with a roar like that of the clouds, Agni made every creature within it tremble. And, O Bharata, that burning forest then looked resplendent like the king of mountains, Meru, blazing with the rays of the sun fallen thereupon. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 228. Vaisampayana said, "Then those foremost of car warriors, Krishna and Arjuna, riding in their cars and placing themselves on opposite sides of that forest, began a great slaughter, on all sides, of the creatures dwelling in Kandava. At whatever point any of the creatures residing in Pandava could be seen attempting to escape, thither rushed those mighty heroes to prevent its flight. Indeed, those two excellent cars seemed to be but one, and the two warriors also therein but one individual. And while the forest was burning, hundreds and thousands of living creatures, uttering frightful yells, began to run about in all directions. Some had particular limbs burnt, some were scorched with excessive heat, and some came out, and some ran about from fear. And some clasping their children, and some their parents and brothers, died calmly without, from excess of affection, being able to abandon these that were dear to them. And many there were who, biting their nether lips, rose upwards and soon fell whirling into the blazing element below. And some were seen to roll on the ground with wings, eyes, and feet scorched and burnt. These creatures were all seen to perish there almost soon enough. The tanks and ponds within that forest, heated by the fire around, began to boil. The fishes and the tortoises in them were all seen to perish. During that great slaughter of living creatures in that forest, the burning bodies of various animals looked as if fire itself had assumed many forms. The birds that took wings to escape from that conflagration were pierced by Arjuna with his shafts, and cut into pieces. They fell down into the burning element below. Pierced all over with Arjuna's shafts, the birds dropped down into the burning forest, uttering loud cries. The denizens of the forest, struck with those shafts, began to roar and yell. The clamor they raised was like unto the frightful uproar heard during the churning of the ocean in days of yore. The mighty flames of the blazing fire reaching the firmament caused great anxiety to the celestials themselves. Then all the illustrious dwellers in heaven went in a body unto him of 100 sacrifices and 1,000 eyes, viz., their chief, that grinder of azuras. Approaching Indra, the celestial said, Why, O Lord of immortals, doth Agni burn these creatures below? Hath the time come for the destruction of the world? Vyasa continued, hearing these words of the gods, and himself beholding what Agni was doing, the slayer of Dhritarashtra set out for the protection of the forest of Pandava. And Vasva, the chief of the celestials, soon covering the sky with masses of clouds of every kind, began to shower upon the burning forest. Those masses of clouds by hundreds and thousands, commanded by Indra, began to pour rain upon Pandava in showers thick as the flagstaffs of battle cars. But the showers were all dried up in the sky itself by the heat of the fire, and could not, therefore, reach the fire at all. Then the slayer of Namuchi, getting angry with Agni, collected huge masses of clouds and caused them to yield a heavy downpour. Then, with the flames contending with those heavy showers, and with masses of clouds overhead, that forest, filled with smoke and flashes of lightning, became terrible to behold. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 229. Vyasa said, Then Vibhatsu, the son of Pandu, invoking his excellent weapons, prevented that shower of rain by Indra, by means of a shower of his own weapons. And Arjuna of immeasurable soul soon covered the forest of Pandava with innumerable arrows, like the moon covering the atmosphere with a thick fog. When the sky above that forest was thus covered with the arrows of Arjuna, no living creature could then escape from below. And it so happened that while that forest was burning, Takshaka, the chief of the Nagas, was not there, having gone at that time to the field of Kurukshetra. But Aswasena, the mighty son of Takshaka, was there. He made great efforts to escape from that fire, but confined by Arjuna's shafts he succeeded not in finding a way. It was then that his mother, the daughter of a snake, determined to save him by swallowing him first. His mother first swallowed his head and then was swallowing his tail. And desirous of saving her son, the sea snake rose up from the earth, while still employed in swallowing her son's tail. But Arjuna, as soon as he beheld her escaping, severed her head from her body by means of a sharp and keen-edged arrow. Indra saw all this, and desiring to save his friend's son, the wielder of the thunderbolt, by raising a violent wind, deprived Arjuna of consciousness. During those few moments, Aswasena succeeded in effecting his escape. Beholding that manifestation of the power of illusion, and deceived by that snake, Arjuna was much enraged. He forthwith cut every animal seeking to escape by the skies into 2, 3, or more pieces. And Vibhatsu in anger, and Agni, and Vasudeva also, cursed the snake that had escaped so deceitfully, saying, Never shalt thou be famous. And Jishnu, remembering the deception practiced upon him, became angry, and covering the firmament with a cloud of arrows, sought to fight with him of 1,000 eyes. The chief of the celestials also, seeing Arjuna in anger, sought to fight with him, and hurled his own fierce weapons, covering the wide expanse of the firmament. Then the winds, making a loud roar and agitating all the oceans, brought together masses of clouds in the sky, charged with torrents of rain. Those masses of clouds began to vomit thunder and terrible flashes of lightning charged with the thunderclap. Then Arjuna, possessing a knowledge of means, hurled the excellent weapon called Vyasa with proper mantras to dispel those clouds. With that weapon the energy and force of Indra's thunderbolt and of those clouds were destroyed. And the torrents of rain with which those clouds were charged were all dried up, and the lightning that played amongst them was also destroyed. Within a moment the sky was cleared of dust and darkness, and a delicious, cool breeze began to blow, and the disk of the sun resumed its normal state. Then the eater of clarified butter, Agni, glad because none could baffle him, assumed various forms, and sprinkled over with the fat exuded by the bodies of creatures, blazed forth with all his flames, filling the universe with his roar. Then numerous birds of the Garuda tribe bearing excellent feathers, beholding that the forest was protected by Krishna and Arjuna, descended filled with pride from the upper skies, desirous of striking those heroes with their thunder-like wings, beaks, and claws. Innumerable Nagas also, with faces emitting fire descending from high, approached Arjuna, vomiting the most virulent poison all the while. Beholding them approach, Arjuna cut them into pieces by means of arrows steeped in the fire of his own wrath. Then those birds and snakes, deprived of life, fell into the burning element below. And there came also, desirous of battle, innumerable asuras with Gandharvas and Yakshas and Rakshasas and Nagas sending forth terrific yells. Armed with machines vomiting from their throats, mouths, iron balls and bullets, and catapults for propelling huge stones, and rockets, they approached to strike Krishna and Partha, their energy and strength increased by wrath. But though they rained a perfect shower of weapons, Vibhatsu, addressing them reproachfully, struck off their heads with his own sharp arrows. That slayer of foes, Krishna, also, endued with great energy, made a great slaughter of the Daitya and the Danava with his discus. Many asuras of immeasurable might, pierced with Krishna's arrows and smitten with the force of his discus, became motionless like waifs and strays stranded on the bank by the violence of the waves. Then Sakra, the lord of the celestials, riding on his white elephant, rushed at those heroes, and taking up his thunderbolt, which could never go in vain, hurled it with great force. And the slayer of asuras said unto the gods, These two are slain. Beholding the fierce thunderbolt about to be hurled by their chief, the celestials all took up their respective weapons. Yama, O king, took up the death-dealing mace, and Kuvara his spiked club, and Varuna his noose and beautiful missile. And Skanda, Kartikeya, took up his long lance and stood motionless like the mountain of Meru. The Ashwin stood there with resplendent plants in their hands. Dhatri stood, bow in hand, and Jaya with a thick club. Tvastri of great strength took up in wrath a huge mountain, and Surya stood with a bright dart, and Mrityu with a battle-axe. Aryaman stalked about with a terrible bludgeon furnished with sharp spikes, and Mitra stood there with a discus sharp as a razor. And, O monarch, Pusha and Bhaga and Savitri, in wrath, rushed at Krishna and Partha with bows and scimitars in hand. And Rudras and the Vasus, the mighty Maruts and the Viswadevas and the Sathyas, all resplendent with their own energy, these and many other celestials, armed with various weapons, rushed against those exalted of men, Krishna and Partha, for smiting them down. Then were seen in that great conflict wonderful portents all around, robbing every creature of his sense, and resembling those that appeared at the time of the universal dissolution. But Arjuna and Krishna, fearless and invincible in battle, beholding Sakra and the other celestials prepared for fight, calmly waited, bows in hands. Skilled in battle, those heroes in wrath assailed the advancing host of celestials with their own thunder-like arrows. The celestials, repeatedly routed by Krishna and Arjuna, at last left the field of battle for fear and sought the protection of Indra. The Munis who were witnessing the battle from the skies, beholding the celestials defeated by Madhava and Arjuna, were filled with wonder. Sakra, also repeatedly witnessing their prowess in battle, became exceedingly gratified and once more rushed to the assault. The chastiser of Paka then caused a heavy shower of stones, desiring to ascertain the prowess of Arjuna, who was able to draw the bow even with his left hand. Arjuna, in great wrath, dispelled with his arrows that thick shower. Then he of 100 sacrifices, beholding that shower baffled, once more caused a thicker shower of stones. But the son of the chastiser of Paka, viz., Arjuna, gratified his father by baffling that shower also with his swift arrows. Then Sakra, desirous of smiting down the son of Pandu, tore up with his hands a large peak from Mandara, with tall trees on it, and hurled it against him. But Arjuna divided that mountain peak into 1,000 pieces by his swift-going and fire-mouthed arrows. The fragments of that mountain, in falling through the skies, looked as if the sun and the moon and the planets, displaced from their positions, fell down on earth. That huge peak fell down upon that forest and by its fall killed numerous living creatures that dwelt in Pandava. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 230. Vyasa said, Then the inhabitants of the forest of Pandava, the Danavas and Rakshasas and Nagas and wolves and bears and other wild animals, and elephants with rent temples, and tigers, and lions with manes and deer and buffaloes by hundreds, and birds, and various other creatures, frightened at the falling stones and extremely anxious, began to fly in all directions. They saw the forest, burning all around, and Krishna and Arjuna also ready with their weapons. Frightened at the terrible sounds that were audible there, those creatures lost their power of movement. Beholding the forest burning in innumerable places, and Krishna also ready to smite them down with his weapons, they all set up a frightful roar. With that terrible clamor, as also with the roar of fire, the whole welkin resounded, as it were, with the voice of portentous clouds. Kesva of dark hue and mighty arms, in order to compass their destruction, hurled at them his large and fierce discus resplendent with its own energy. The forest dwellers, including the Danavas and the Rakshasas, afflicted by that weapon, were cut in hundreds of pieces and fell unto the mouth of Agni. Mangled by Krishna's discus, the Asuras were besmeared with blood and fat and looked like evening clouds. And, O Bharata, he of the Vrishni race moved able like death itself, slaying Pisachas and birds and Nagas and other creatures by thousands. The discus itself, repeatedly hurled from the hands of Krishna, that slayer of all foes, came back to his hands after slaughtering numberless creatures. The face and form of Krishna, that soul of every created thing, became fierce to behold while he was thus employed in the slaughter of the Pisachas, Nagas, and Rakshasas. No one among the celestials who had mustered there could vanquish in battle Krishna and Arjuna. When the celestials saw that they could not protect that forest from the might of Krishna and Arjuna by extinguishing that conflagration, they retired from the scene. Then, O monarch, he of 100 sacrifices, Indra, beholding the immortals retreat, became filled with joy and applauded Krishna and Arjuna. And when the celestials gave up the fight, an incorporeal voice, deep and loud, addressing him of 100 sacrifices, said, Thy friend Takshaka, that chief of snakes, hath not been slain. Before the conflagration commenced in Pandava, he had journeyed to Kurukshetra. Know from my words, O Vasva, that Vasudeva and Arjuna are incapable of being vanquished in battle by any one. They are Nara and Narayana, those gods of old heard of in heaven. Thou knowest what their energy is and what their prowess. Invincible in battle, these best of old rishis are unconquerable by any one in all the worlds. They deserve the most reverential worship of all the celestials and Asuras, of Yakshas and Rakshasas and Gandharvas, of human beings and Kinnaras and Nagas. Therefore, O Vasva, it behoveth thee to go hence with all the celestials. The destruction of Pandava hath been ordained by fate. Then the chief of the immortals, ascertaining those words to be true, abandoned his wrath and jealousy, and went back to heaven. The dwellers in heaven, O monarch, beholding the illustrious Indra abandon the fight, followed him with all their soldiers. Then those heroes, Vasudeva and Arjuna, when they saw the chief of the celestials retreat accompanied by all the gods, set up a leonine roar. And, O monarch, Kesva and Arjuna, after Indra had left the scene, became exceedingly glad. Those heroes then fearlessly assisted at the conflagration of the forest. Arjuna scattered the celestials like the wind scattering the clouds, and slew with showers of his arrows numberless creatures that dwelt in Pandava. Cut off by Arjuna's arrows, no one amongst the innumerable creatures could escape from the burning forest. Far from fighting with him, none amongst even the strongest creatures mustered there could look at Arjuna, whose weapons were never futile. Sometimes piercing 100 creatures with one shaft and sometimes a single creature with 100 shafts, Arjuna moved about in his car. The creatures themselves, deprived of life, began to fall into the mouth of Agni, god of fire, struck down as it were by death itself. On the banks of rivers, or on uneven plains, or on crematoriums, go where they did, the creatures, dwelling in Pandava, found no ease, for wherever they sought shelter there they were afflicted by the heat. And hosts of creatures roared in pain, and elephants and deer and wolves set up cries of affliction. At that sound the fishes of the Ganges and the sea, and the various tribes of Vidyadharas dwelling in that forest all became frightened. O thou of mighty arms, let alone battling with them, no one could even gaze at Arjuna and Janardana of dark hue. Hari slew with his discus those Rakshasas and Danavas and Nagas that rushed at him in bands. Of huge bodies, their heads and trunks were cut off by the swift motion of the discus, and deprived of life they fell down into the blazing fire. Gratified with large quantities of flesh, blood, and fat, the flames rose up to a great height without a curling wreath of smoke. Hudasana, fire god, with blazing and coppery eyes, and flaming tongue and large mouth, and the hair on the crown of his head all fiery, drinking, with the help of Krishna and Arjuna, that nectar-like stream of animal fat, became filled with joy. Gratified greatly, Agni derived much happiness. And it so happened that the slayer of Madhu suddenly beheld an Asura of the name of Maya escaping from the abode of Takshaka. Agni, having Vayu for his car driver, assuming a body with matted locks on head, and roaring like the clouds, pursued the Asura, desirous of consuming him. Beholding the Asura, Vasudeva stood with his weapon upraised, ready to smite him down. Seeing the discus uplifted and Agni pursuing from behind to burn him, Maya said, "Run to me, O Arjuna, and protect me." Hearing his affrighted voice, Arjuna said, "Fear not." That voice of Arjuna, O Bharata, seemed to give Maya his life. As the merciful son of Pritha said unto Maya that there was nothing to fear, he of the Dasara race no longer desired to slay Maya, who was the brother of Namuchi, and Agni also burned him not. Vaisampayana continued, protected from Indra by Krishna and Partha, Agni, gifted with great intelligence, burned that forest for 5 and 10 days. And while the forest burned, Agni spared only 6 of its dwellers, viz., Aswasena, Maya, and 4 birds called Sarngakas. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 231. Janamejaya said, O Brahmana, tell me why, and when that forest burnt in that way, Agni consumed not the birds called Sarngakas? Thou hast, O Brahmana, recited to us the cause of Aswasena and the Danava Maya not having been consumed. But thou hast not as yet said what the cause was of the escape of the Sarngakas. The escape of those birds, O Brahmana, appeareth to me to be wonderful. Tell us why they were not destroyed in that dreadful conflagration. Vaisampayana said, O slayer of all foes, I shall tell thee all as to why Agni did not burn up those birds during the conflagration. There was, O king, a great rishi known by the name of Mandapala, conversant with all the shastras, of rigid vows, devoted to asceticism, and the foremost of all virtuous persons. Following in the wake of rishis that had drawn up their virile fluid, that ascetic, O monarch, with every sense under complete control, devoted himself to study and virtue. Having reached the opposite shores of asceticism, O Bharata, he left his human form and went to the region of the Pitris. But going thither he failed to obtain the expected fruit of his acts. He asked the celestials that sat around the king of the dead as to the cause of his treatment, saying, Why have these regions become unattainable by me, regions that I had thought had been acquired by me by my ascetic devotions? Have I not performed those acts whose fruits are these regions? Ye inhabitants of heaven, tell me why these regions are shut against me. I will do that which will give me the fruit of my ascetic penances. The celestials answered, Hear, O Brahmana, of those acts and things on account of which men are born debtors. Without doubt, it is for religious rites, studies according to the ordinance, and progeny, that men are born debtors. These debts are all discharged by sacrifices, asceticism, and offspring. Thou art an ascetic and hast also performed sacrifices, but thou hast no offspring. These regions are shut against thee only for want of children. Beget children, therefore. Thou shalt then enjoy multifarious regions of felicity. The Vedas declared that the son rescueth the father from a hell called Put. Then, O best of Brahmanas, strive to beget offspring. Vyasa continued, Mandapala, having heard these words of the dwellers in heaven, reflected how best he could obtain the largest number of offspring within the shortest period of time. The rishi, after reflection, understood that of all creatures birds alone were blessed with fecundity. Assuming the form of a sarngaka, the rishi had connection with a female bird of the same species called by the name of Jarita. And he begot upon her 4 sons who were all reciters of the Vedas. Leaving all those sons of his with their mother in that forest, while they were still within eggs, the ascetic went to another wife called by the name of Lapita. And, O Bharata, when the exalted sage went away for the company of Lapita, moved by affection for her offspring, Jarita became very thoughtful. Though forsaken by their father in the forest of Kandava, Jarita, anxious in her affection for them, could not forsake her offspring, those infant rishis encased in eggs. Moved by parental affection, she brought up these children born of her, herself following the pursuits proper to her own species. Some time after, the rishi, in wandering over that forest in the company of Lapita, saw Agni coming towards Kandava to burn it down. Then the Brahmana Mandapala, knowing the intention of Agni and remembering also that his children were all young, moved by fear, gratified the god of the burning element, that regent of the universe, endued with great energy. And he did this, desiring to put in a word for his unfledged offspring. Addressing Agni, the rishi said, Thou art, O Agni, the mouth of all the worlds. Thou art the carrier of the sacrificial butter. O purifier of all sins, thou movest invisible with the frame of every creature. The learned have spoken of thee as an one, and again as possessed of triple nature. The wise perform their sacrifices before thee, taking thee as consisting of 8 mouths. The great rishis declare that this universe hath been created by thee. O thou that feedest on sacrificial butter, without thee this whole universe would be destroyed in a single day. Bowing to thee, the Brahmanas, accompanied by their wives and children, go to eternal regions won by them by help of their own deeds. O Agni, the learned represent thee as the clouds in the heavens charged with lightning. O Agni, the flames put forth by thee consume every creature. O thou of great splendor, this universe hath been created by thee. The Vedas are thy word. All creatures, mobile and immobile, depend upon thee. Water primarily dependeth on thee, so also the whole of this universe. All offerings of clarified butter and oblations of food to the Pitris have been established in thee. O God, thou art the consumer, and thou art the creator, and thou art Vrihaspati himself, in intelligence. Thou art the twin Ashwins, thou art Surya, thou art Soma, thou art Vayu. Vyasa continued, O monarch, thus praised by Mandapala, Agni was gratified with that rishi of immeasurable energy, and the god, well pleased, replied, What good can I do to thee? Then Mandapala with joined palms said unto the carrier of clarified butter, While thou burnest the forest of Kandava, spare my children. The illustrious bearer of clarified butter replied, So be it. It was, therefore, O monarch, that he blazed not forth, while consuming the forest of Kandava, for the destruction of Mandapala's children. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 232. Vyasa said, When the fire blazed forth in the forest of Kandava, the infant birds became very much distressed and afflicted. Filled with anxiety, they saw not any means of escape. Their mother, the helpless Jarita, knowing that they were too young to escape, was filled with sorrow and wept aloud. And she said, Oh, the terrible conflagration, illuminating the whole universe and burning the forest down, approacheth towards us, increasing my woe. These infants with immature understanding, without feathers and feet, and the sole refuge of our deceased ancestors, afflict me. Oh, this fire approacheth, spreading fear all around, and licking with its tongue the tallest trees. But my unfledged children are incapable of effecting their escape. I myself am not capable of escaping, taking all these with me. Nor am I capable of abandoning them, for my heart is distressed on their account. Whom amongst my sons shall I leave behind, and whom shall I carry with me? What act should I do now that is consistent with duty? What also do you, my infant sons, think? I do not, even by reflection, see any way of escape for you. I shall even cover you with my wings and die with you. Your cruel father left me some time before, saying, Upon this Jaratari, because he is the eldest of my sons, will my race depend. My second Sarasrika will beget progeny for the expansion of my ancestors' race. My third, Stamvamitra, will be devoted to asceticism, and my youngest, Drona, will become the foremost of those acquainted with the Vedas. But how hath this terrible calamity overtaken us? Whom shall I take with me? As I am deprived of judgment, what should I do that is consistent with duty? I do not see, by the exercise of my own judgment, the escape of my children from the fire. Vyasa said, unto their mother indulging in these lamentations, the infant one said, O mother, relinquishing thy affection for us, go thou to a place where there is no fire. If we are killed here, thou mayest have other children born to thee. If thou, O mother, be killed, we can have no more children in our race. Reflecting upon both these calamities, the time hath come for thee, O mother, to do that which is beneficial to our race. Do not be influenced by affection for thy offspring, which promises to destroy both us and thee. If thou savest thyself, our father, who is even desirous of winning regions of felicity, may have his wishes gratified. Hearing what the infant said, Jarita replied, There is a hole here in the ground near to this tree, belonging to a mouse. Enter this hole without loss of time. You shall have then no fear of fire. After ye have entered it, I shall, ye children, cover its mouth with dust. This is the only means of escape that I see from the blazing fire. Then when the fire will be put out, I shall return hither to remove the dust. Follow my advice if you are to escape from the conflagration. The infant birds replied, Without feathers we are but so many balls of flesh. If we enter the hole, certain it is that the carnivorous mouse will destroy us all. Beholding this danger before us, we cannot enter this hole. Alas, we do not see any means by which we may escape from the fire or from the mouse. We do not see how our father's act of procreation may be prevented from becoming futile, and how also our mother may be saved. If we enter the hole, the mouse will destroy us, we remain where we are, and the sky-ranging fire will destroy us. Reflecting upon both the calamities, a death by fire is preferable to a death by being eaten up. If we are devoured by the mouse within the hole, that death is certainly ignoble, whereas the destruction of the body in fire is approved by the wise. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 233. Vyasa said, hearing those words of her sons, Jarita continued, The little mouse that had come out of this hole was seized by a hawk with his claws and carried away hence. Therefore, ye may fearlessly enter this hole now. The young ones replied, We are not by any means certain of that mouse having been taken away by the hawk. There may be other mice living here. From them we have every fear. Whereas it is doubtful whether fire will at all approach us here. Already we see an adverse wind blowing the flames away. If we enter the hole, death is certain at the hands of the dwellers in the hole. But if we remain where we are, death is uncertain. O mother, a position in which death is uncertain is better than that in which it is certain. It is thy duty, therefore, to escape thyself, for, if thou livest thou mayest obtain other children as good. Their mother then said, Ye children, I myself saw the mighty hawk, that best of birds, swoop down and fly away with the mouse from the hole. And while he was flying away swiftly, I followed him behind and pronounced blessing on him for his having taken away the mouse from the hole. I said unto him, O King of hawks, because thou art flying away with our enemy, the mouse, and thy claws, mayest thou, without a foe, live in heaven with a golden body. Afterwards, when that hawk devoured the mouse, I came away, obtaining his leave. Therefore, ye children, enter this hole trustfully. Ye have nothing to fear. The mouse that was its inmate was seized and taken away by the hawk in my sight. The young ones again said, O mother, we do not by any means know that the mouse hath been carried away by the hawk. We cannot enter this hole in the ground without being certain of the fact. Their mother said, I know to a certainty that the mouse hath been carried away by the hawk. Therefore, ye children, ye have nothing to fear, do what I say. The young ones again said, We do not, O mother, say that thou art dispelling our fears with a false story. For whatever is done by a person when his reason hath been disturbed can scarcely be said to be that person's deliberate act. Thou hast not been benefited by us, nor dost thou know who we are. Why dost thou, therefore, strive to protect us at so much cost to thyself? Who are we to thee? Thou art young and handsome, and capable of seeking out thy husband. Go unto thy husband. Thou shalt obtain good children again. Let us by entering the fire attain to regions of felicity. If, however, the fire consume us not, thou mayest come back and obtain us again. Vyasa said, The parent bird then, thus addressed by her sons, left them in Pandava and hastily went to the spot where there was no fire and there was safety. Then Agni in haste and with fierce flames approached the spot where the sons of Mandapala were. The young birds saw the blazing fire come towards them. Then Jaratari, the eldest of the four, in the hearing of Agni, began to speak. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 234. Jaratari said, The person that is wise remaineth wakeful in view of death. Accordingly, when the hour of death approacheth, he feeleth no pangs. But the person of perplexed soul, who remaineth not awake, when the hour of death comes, feeleth the pangs of death and never attaineth salvation. The second brother Sarasrika said, Thou art patient and intelligent. The time is come when our lives are threatened. Without doubt, one only amongst many becometh wise and brave. The third brother, Stamvamitra, said, The eldest brother is called the protector. It is the eldest brother that rescueth the younger ones from danger. If the eldest himself faileth to rescue them, what can the younger ones do? The fourth and the youngest brother, Drona, said, The cruel god of fire, with 7 tongues and 7 mouths, quickly cometh towards our habitation, blazing forth in splendor and licking up everything in his path. Vyasa continued, having addressed one another thus, the sons of Mandapala then each devotedly addressed an eulogistic hymn to Agni. Listen now, O monarch, to those hymns as I recite them. Jaratari said, Thou art, O fire, the soul of air. Thou art the body of the earth's vegetation. O Sukra, water is thy parent as thou art the parent of water. O thou of great energy, thy flames, like the rays of the sun, extend themselves above, below, behind, and on each side. Sarasrika said, O smoke-bannered god, our mother is not to be seen, and we know not our father. Our feathers have not grown as yet. We have none to protect us save thee. Therefore, O Agni, infants that we are, protect us. O Agni, as we are distressed, protect us with that auspicious form thou hast and with those 7 flames of thine. We seek protection at thy hands. Thou alone, O Agni, art the giver of heat in the universe. O Lord, there is none else, save thee, that giveth heat to the rays of the sun. O, protect us who are young and who are rishis. O Havyavaha, carrier of sacrificial butter, be pleased to go hence by some other route. Stamvamitra said, Thou alone, O Agni, art everything. This whole universe is established in thee. Thou sustainest every creature, and thou supportest the universe. Thou art the carrier of the sacrificial butter, and thou art the excellent sacrificial butter itself. The wise know thee to be one, as cause, and many, as effects. Having created the 3 worlds, thou, O Havyavaha, again destroyest them when the time cometh, swelling thyself forth. Thou art the productive cause of the whole universe, and thou also art the essence in which the universe dissolveth itself. Drona said, O Lord of the universe, growing in strength and remaining within their bodies, thou causest the food that living creatures eat to be digested. Everything, therefore, is established in thee. O Sukra, O thou from whose mouth the Vedas have sprung, it is thou who assumest the form of the sun, and sucking up the waters of the earth and every liquid juice that the earth yields, givest them back in time in the form of rain and causest everything to grow. From thee, O Sukra, are these plants and creepers with green foliage. From thee have sprung these tanks and pools, and the great ocean also that is ever blessed. O thou of fierce rays, this our, human, body dependeth on Varuna, the water god. We are unable to bear thy heat. Be thou, therefore, our auspicious protector. O, destroy us not. O thou of copper-hued eyes, O thou of red neck, O thou whose path is marked by a black color, save us by going along any remote route, as indeed the ocean saveth the house on its banks. Vyasa continued, thus addressed by Drona that utterer of Brahma-Agni, well pleased at what he heard, and remembering also the promise he had made to Mandapala, replied unto him, saying, Thou art a rishi, O Drona. For what thou hast said is Brahma, Vedic truth. I shall do your pleasure. Fear not. Indeed, Mandapala had spoken to me of you to the effect that I should spare his sons, while consuming the forest. The words he spoke in thy speech also are entitled to great weight to me. Say what I am to do. O best of Brahmanas, I have been greatly pleased with I am. Blessed be thou, O Brahmana. Drona said, O Sukra, these cats trouble us every day. O Hudasana, consume them with their friends and relatives. Vyasa continued, then Agni did what the Sarngakas asked him to do, telling them of his intentions. And, O Janamejaya, growing in strength, he began then to consume the forest of Khandava. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 235. Vyasa said, O thou of Kuru's race, the Rishi Mandapala became very anxious about his children, although he had spoken of them to the god of fierce rays. Indeed, his mind was not in peace. Distressed on account of his sons, he addressed Lapada, his second wife with whom he then was, saying, O Lapada, as my children are incapable of the power of moving, how are they? When the fire will grow in strength and the wind begin to blow violently, my children will scarcely be able to save themselves. How will their mother be able to rescue them? That innocent woman will be afflicted with great sorrow when she will find herself unable to save her offspring. Oh, how will she compose herself, uttering various lamentations on account of my children who are all incapable of taking wing or rising up into the air? Oh, how is Jaratari, my son, and how is Sarasrika, and how is Stamvamitra, and how is Drona, and how also is their helpless mother? Unto the Rishi Mandapala thus weeping in the forest, Lapada, O Bharata, thus replied, under the influence of jealousy, Thou need not worry for thy children who, as thou hast assured me, are all rishis endued with energy and prowess. They can have no fear from fire. Didst thou not speak to Agni in my presence, in their behalf? Has not the illustrious deity promised to save them? One of the regents of the universe as Agni is, he will never falsify his speech. Thou hast no anxiety, nor is thy heart inclined towards benefiting friends. It is only by thinking of her my rival, Jarita, that thou art so distracted. Certain it is that the love thou bearest to me is not equal to what thou hadst for her at first. He that hath two parties dividing his attention can easily behold one of those suffer all sorts of pangs, but he should not disregard the party that is next to his heart. Then go thou to Jarita, for whom thy heart is sorrowing. As for myself, I shall henceforth wander alone, as a fit reward for my having attached myself to a wicked person. Hearing these words, Mandapala replied, I do not wander over the earth with such intentions as thou conceivest. It is only for the sake of progeny that I am here. And even those that I have are in danger. He who casteth off what he hath for the sake of what he may acquire is a wicked person. The world disregardeth and insulteth him. Therefore, go I must. As for thyself thou art free to do what thou choosest. This blazing fire that licketh up the trees causeth sorrow in my anxious heart and riseth therein evil presentiments. Vyasa continued, meanwhile, after the fire had left the spot where the Sarngakas dwelt, Jarita, much attached to her children, hastily came thither to see how they were. She found that all of them had escaped from the fire and were perfectly well. Beholding their mother, they began to weep, though safe and sound. She too shed tears upon beholding them alive. And she embraced, one by one, all her weeping children. Just at that time, O Bharata, the Rishi Mandapala arrived there. But none of his sons expressed joy upon beholding him. The Rishi, however, began to speak to them one after another, and unto Jarita also, repeatedly. But neither his sons nor Jarita spoke anything well or ill unto him in return. Mandapala then said, Who amongst these is thy firstborn, and who the next after him? And who is the third, and who the youngest? I am speaking unto thee woefully, why dost thou not reply to me? I left thee, it is true, but I was not happy where I was. Jarita then said, What hast thou to do with the eldest of these, and what with him that is next? And what with the third, and what with the youngest? Go now unto that lapida of sweet smiles, and endued with youth, unto whom thou didst go of old, beholding me deficient in everything. Mandapala replied, As regards females, there is nothing so destructive of their happiness whether in this or the other world as a co-wife and a clandestine lover. There is nothing like these two that inflames the fire of hostility and causes such anxiety. Even the auspicious and well-behaved Arundhati, celebrated amongst all creatures, had been jealous of the illustrious Vasishtha of great purity of mind and always devoted to the good of his wife. Arundhati insulted even the wise Muni amongst the celestial 7. In consequence of such insulting thoughts of hers, she has become a little star, like fire mixed with smoke, sometimes visible and sometimes invisible, like an omen portending no good, amongst a constellation of 7 bright stars representing the 7 rishis. I look to thee for the sake of children. I never wronged thee, like Vasishtha who never wronged his wife. Thou hast, therefore, by thy jealousy behaved towards me like Arundhati of old towards Vasishtha. Men should never trust women even if they be wives. Women, when they have become mothers, do not much mind serving their husbands. Vaisampayana continued, After this, all his children came forward to worship him. And he also began to speak kindly towards them all, giving them every assurance. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 236. Vaisampayana said, Mandapala then addressed his children, saying, I had spoken unto Agni for the safety of you all. The illustrious deity had assured me that he would grant my wish. At those words of Agni, and knowing the virtuous disposition of your mother, as also the great energy that is in yourselves, I came not here earlier. Therefore, ye sons, do not harbor in your hearts any resentment towards me. Ye are all rishis acquainted with the Vedas. Even Agni knoweth you well. Vaisampayana continued, having given such assurances unto his sons, the Brahmana Mandapala took with him his wife and sons, and leaving that region, went away to some other country. It was thus that the illustrious god of fierce rays, having grown in strength, consumed the forest of Khandava with the help of Krishna and Arjuna, for the good of the world. And Agni, having drunk several rivers of fat and marrow, became highly gratified, and showed himself to Arjuna. Then Purandara, surrounded by the Maruts, descended from the firmament and addressing Partha and Kesva said, Ye have achieved a feat that a celestial even could not. Ask ye each a boon that is not obtainable by any man. I have been gratified with you. Vaisampayana continued, Then Partha asked from Indra all his weapons. At this Sakra of great splendor, having fixed the time for giving them, said, When the illustrious Madhava becomes pleased with thee, then, O son of Pandu, I will give thee all my weapons. O prince of Kuru's race, I shall know when the time cometh. Even for thy austere asceticism I will give thee all my weapons of fire and all my Vayavya weapons, and thou also wilt accept them all of me. Then Vasudeva asked that his friendship with Arjuna might be eternal. The chief of the celestials granted unto the intelligent Krishna the boon he desired. And having granted these boons unto Krishna and Arjuna, the lord of the Maruts, accompanied by the celestials, ascended to heaven, having also spoken to Hudasana, one whose food is sacrificial butter. Agni also, having burnt that forest with its animals and birds for 5 and 10 days, became gratified and ceased to burn. Having eaten flesh in abundance and drunk fat and blood, he became highly gratified, and addressing Achyuta and Arjuna said, I have been gratified by you 2 tigers among men. At my command, ye heroes, ye shall be competent to go wheresoever ye choose. Thus addressed by the illustrious Agni, Arjuna, and Vasudeva, and the Danava Maya, also these three, having wandered a little, at last sat themselves down on the delightful banks of a river. End of Book 1. Adi Parva. Present you by HinduMonastery.com.